Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Planning Committee being held at 6 p.m. on the 25th of February 2001 for Thurrock Council. Due to government guidance on social distancing and COVID-19, the extraordinary meeting on the 25th of February will be held virtually. Arrangements have been made for the press and public to watch the meeting via the live council's webcast channel at thurrock.gov.uk/webcast. And in addition to this recording, there will be an audio recording available on the council's website within 5 working days of this meeting. Okay then, so obviously we're looking at an extraordinary meeting this evening. That was due to quite a large number of applications in February. So thank you to everyone for arranging that, and thank you for everyone for being here this evening. We do have 3 items to go through, so hopefully, it'll be nice and, well, should be more manageable, should we say. Okay, right, so with that, we'll go on to apologies for absence. Wendy, do we have any apologies for absence?
No, Chair, we've received no apologies.
Okay, fantastic. All right then, so item 2, items of urgent business. I've not considered any items of urgent business here this evening. And then that takes us on to declarations of interest. Okay, so at this stage, I'm only after declarations of interest and not declarations of correspondence. We'll do that next. So does anybody have anything they'd like to declare before the meeting starts? Councillor Churchman, I see you've got your hand raised. Councillor Churchman, you got your mic on mute.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Even though I've, the application Ship Lane 19014144. Even though this is not my ward, it's I'm coming into this meeting tonight with an open mind. I haven't been spoke to, so I just want to declare that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, as everyone should be. So I appreciate you do have links to Averley, etc. So yeah, thank you, Councillor Churchman, for that. Okay, no other hands are raised, so we'll now go on to declaration of receipt of any correspondence. Now, it's been a very active few weeks with my emails. I'm sure you would have received a lot of emails as well. In relation to Kemp's Farm, I have received an email from James Bompass, and I understand he's the agent, and I think everyone would have received a email from him. In terms of number 8 Lancaster Road, I've not received anything. And in terms of the Thurrock Football Club, now I have, and I know you have all received huge volumes of emails from residents, ranging from the Averley Forum. You've received emails from residents in relation to support from Grays Athletic and their fans, and the director from Grays Athletic as well. And then in addition to that, I've received a few phone calls, but I've not answered anything. I've not returned any phone calls, and I've not responded to any of those emails other than to acknowledge a few and pass them on to Democratic Services. So with that, in addition, an email from Councillor Kerring and Councillor Van Day. I did receive 2 emails from them, and I think they forwarded to the rest of the committee. So that's the receipt of correspondence. There's a few other hands raised. I'll go to Mike first, as I can see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very much as with yourself, but in addition, I had a phone call from Tracy Mendham, one of the locals, regarding the Thurrock Football Club development. A phone call this afternoon, and I did answer. So I've had that conversation.
Thank you. There was some other hand? Councillor Byrne, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I've had all sorts. I don't know if everybody's got a lovely pack of photos from someone, but I've had letters and photos and all sorts. So, but I don't know where they're from because I've just been them. So I can't say where they're from, but I've had so much this month, more than I've ever had.
Yes, good. I think those photos are from James Bompass in relation to application Kemp's Farm. I received those also. Councillor Sue Shinnick.
Oh, hello there. Yeah, I had a telephone call from Tracy regarding the Aveley Football Club as well, and also had correspondence for Kemp's Farm and Lancaster Road. Okay.
Perfect, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Lawrence next.
Yes, same as the last councillor, but the telephone from the football club, it was a chap. Can't remember his name, but I didn't really go into it. I just listened, and that was it.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've had loads. With regards to Kemp's Farm, I've had the information from James Bumpus, but with regards to Ship Lane, I've had emails from Tracy Mendham, Councillor David Van Day, Kathy Sisterman, Councillor Kerrin, Claire Pitney, Claire Hare, Osmond Dervish, Teresa Webster, Julian Wiseman, Sarah Smallbone, Glyn Jarvis, Dave Doyle, Metropolitan Police, Levy Hitt, Paul Smith, Charlie Skinner. And with regards to Lancaster Road, I've had emails from Havering Building and Landscapes Limited and Andrew Ansell. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Councillor Potter, and very well documented there. Councillor Rice.
Right. Yes, Chair, I've had similar emails on both Kemp's Farm and Thurrock Football Club, and also had something in the post regarding Lancaster Road. And that's about it, yes.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. Right, is anyone else's hands up? Councillor Churchman, did you have your hands up as well?
Yes, Chair. I can only echo what Councillor Potter has said. I've had the same.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. And Councillor Salmons?
Yes, same as Dave Potter, but I also had a phone call from Osmond Deverish. So
Okay, brilliant.
I think that was the Aveley football ground.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Right, I think we're there. We've gone through the whole committee. So with that, I think we can move on, hopefully. Okay, so that's declaration of receipt of any correspondence. So we're now going to go to item 5, which is a public address to the planning committee. That now allows us to speak, or talk about the 3 items we've got on the agenda here this evening. And the first one is item 6. That's 20/01394/OUT, Kemp's Farm in Denise's Lane at South Ockenden. Found on pages 5 to 28. And just a quick thank you to that applicant for waiting very patiently. I know that this was deferred from the last meeting. So yeah, thank you for that. And let's hear what Matthew has to present in his report. Matthew, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So first off, if I open, hopefully, the presentation, if the technology is working. So first things first, hopefully you can see what I'm looking at, which is a presentation, and I'll run through, if you are, I'm hearing no dissenting voices, so I'll run through the images, etc. with you. So this application was on the agenda 2 weeks ago, but time was against us and it wasn't considered, so it's the first item tonight. What is before you is an application which seeks outline planning permission. So all matters, apart from access, are reserved for future consideration. And the proposal is for development of 27 custom build dwellings. Now, just for members' benefit, the MPPF defines custom building as housing which is built by individuals or an individual, singular, or persons working with them. And that housing would be occupied by that individual. So we're not talking about volume house builders, we're talking about houses which are built and occupied by individuals or groups of individuals. So that's the site before you. Dennis's Road is off to the right-hand side, running north to south. And on the left-hand side, that sort of diagonal line is the M25 motorway. If I show you Google Earth image, we're talking about this site here, Dennis's Lane, sorry, it's Dennis's Road, beg your pardon, running along that eastern boundary. Clearly you can make out the M25 motorway. And the built-up area of South Ockenden is further to the south and to the east. And in terms of the local plan designation, as set out within the report, it is within the Metropolitan Greenbelt. So I'm highlighting, hopefully you can see that where the site is. And that's an extract from the adopted local plan policies map, setting out that point. In addition to the site being in the Greenbelt, there are 2 listed buildings, though those are grade 2 listed buildings, which are either within the site or immediately adjacent to the site. So in terms of the proposal, and bearing in mind that issues of layout, landscaping, appearance and scale are reserved and therefore not for consideration tonight, that drawing you see before you, we've marked as indicative because it is indicative. It is the application is only seeking out on permission. So indicatively, what's being proposed is a development, as I said, of 27 custom built dwellings, and they could be arranged as shown on that drawing. Just for orientation, and I'll jump back a slide or 2. What is on the site at the moment is this arrangement of dwellings through here. I think that's in total, there are, I think, 18 which have been developed in recent years. And just for orientation again, the listed building, one of them is there where I'm marking, and the second is just outside the site in a position there. So again, indicatively, that's how the site could be arranged, and it's basically on the existing open land, or the remaining open land to the north and to the south of the existing built development on the site. Again, an indicative CGI image which has been produced by the applicant to show you how the a layout of development could be arranged. That's one indication. Of course, it could be arranged in different ways. And again, the images I'm going to show you now, I'm going to put on the health warning. They are indicative. So there's an indicative house type. Obviously, with custom build, it is up to the individual what they build. That's the whole point of custom or self-build as it's known. So again, purely indicative. Another house type, purely indicative. Ditto, ditto again. And there's a few more sort of images. Again, just the health warning. These are purely indicative. Matters of scale, appearance, landscaping, layout are reserved. They are not for consideration tonight. I think there might be one more. Yeah, again, an indicative indication of how the development could occur, but please don't take that as gospel, because those sorts of matters are reserved for future approval. There are a few photographs of the site. So from the northwest corner of the site looking south, there is an existing water body on the site there, and I think the listed building you can make out sort of centre left, or one of those listed buildings anyway. Again, showing the openness of the site, as I've mentioned, the site's in the Greenbelt, and if you can refer back to that or remember that Google Earth image, what we're talking about is development on those remaining parts of the site which are open and have no built development on them, aside from 2 porta cabins and 2 containers which are on that drawing there. That's from the southern part of the site, so the open land on the southern part of the site, which as you can make out is open and a little bit overgrown, looking towards the existing development on the site, and that's closer to the point of access. The building sort of centre left on the skyline is again the second listed building, which is just outside of the red line, so it's just outside of the site. And I think that's a similar sort of view. Again, you can make out the existing development on the right-hand side there. The M25 motorway is on the left-hand side there, that image, and in point of fact, is on an embankment at that point. So the M25 is in a slightly elevated position in relation to the site. And I think that's the final one. Again, the M25 is off there to the right-hand side. So turning to the issues before you, I've mentioned that sites within the Metropolitan Greenbelt. New residential development in the Greenbelt is inappropriate development by definition. And so there is harm by virtue of the fact that inappropriate development is proposed. The elements of the site where development is proposed are currently open, therefore there is harm to openness. And we've looked at the purposes of the Greenbelt. That's the 5 purposes which are set out here within the Greenbelt chapter of the MPPF, and we've considered there will be harm to varying degrees to purposes B, C and E. Now adding that together, substantial weight should be attached to that harm. So harm by definition, it's inappropriate development, harm to openness and harm to some of the Greenbelt purposes. There is some other harm which I'll refer to a little bit later in the presentation. Now, as ever with Greenbelt, members will be well aware there's a balancing exercise to be undertaken, and that balancing exercise has to look at whether or not there are other considerations which would clearly outweigh the harm. And again, I emphasise the word clearly, such that very special circumstances could exist. Now, the applicant has put forward a number of arguments. Firstly, the delivery of custom build housing and the lack of 5-year housing land supply. And again, consistent with other proposals which have been presented to this committee, we've given significant weight to the issue of housing land supply because the council can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. However, we do need to be careful here about double counting. The applicant is relying on both housing land supply and the delivery of custom build or self-build. I mean, if you look at the relevant paragraph from the MPPF, self-build or custom build is a component of overall housing delivery in the same way that family housing or housing for the elderly or housing for students or affordable housing, they're all elements of housing delivery. So we shouldn't be double counting that. Nevertheless, it does attract significant weight in the balance. The applicant is also relying on an argument that the development would be zero carbon. However, there's not a lot of detail in the application to back that up. And in terms of what's before you tonight, as I said, it's now an application for an outline planning permission. It's self-build or custom build. And what the developer actually does in those circumstances is provide a serviced plot. So a level remediated plot, if contamination was to be found, with access to services, so water, sewerage, etc. Beyond that, it's down to the individual or group of individuals what they build. So in terms of a development which be zero carbon or carbon neutral, it's a little bit difficult of us to make the link between a service site and housing development, which would be potentially zero carbon. In point of fact, members will be well aware of the way that planning policy works, and of course planning policy both at a national and local level encourages environmentally sustainable development. So we put a limited amount of positive weight on that argument, partly due to the lack of evidence and partly due to the fact that it's a policy objective in any case. The applicant is also referring to the location of the site, within a national growth area, and by that we've taken it to mean within the Thames Gateway. That's not a unique factor. An awful lot of the borough actually sits within Thames Gateway, as do adjoining boroughs, both on the north and south side of the River Thames. So that argument could be applied elsewhere quite extensively within the borough, and therefore we've attached no weight to that factor. The applicant is also referring to the benefit of high quality design. I've emphasised the fact this is an outline planning application, so matters of appearance and scale, landscaping layout are not for consideration. We simply don't have those details for approval tonight. There is a submitted design code. However, the detail of that code only refers to certain common elements within the site, such as boundary treatments, such as potential landscaping, such as frontage arrangements. It doesn't provide detail on what an individual plot would look like, because again, we go back to the point, it's the application is presented as a self or custom build, it would be down to an individual or group of individuals what the individual house would look like. There's also policy guidance and policy objectives which encourage high quality design, both the core strategy and national policy and the future iteration to national planning policy, because there will be a revised version before too long, again emphasises the importance of good design. So bearing that in mind, those factors, we can put no positive weight on that particular argument put forward by the applicant. Final consideration put forward by the applicant is the role of the site in the Greenbelt, and they've referred to the Thurrock Greenbelt Assessment, which is a document which will support the new local plan. That particular document, the Greenbelt Assessment, does not identify individual sites or even broad areas for development. It's part of the story of the new local plan, and it will support the new local plan when that plan starts to go towards Regulation 18, which is like the on-deposit version of the plan. Therefore, we can only put very limited weight on that particular argument. So adding that together, although you can put substantial weight on housing delivery, there's only very limited or indeed no weight you can put on the other factors which are brought forward by the applicant. Therefore, we've concluded in Greenbelt terms that the substantial harm is not clearly outweighed. Therefore, very special circumstances do not exist. Just briefly on other issues, the site is relatively remote from the main built-up area of South Ockendon. It's on a road with no public footpath. It's on an unlit road. It's not, therefore, in a location which is easily accessible to amenities, shops, etc., etc. And therefore, we consider that any potential occupiers of that development will be heavily reliant on the use of private car. That runs contrary to a number of national policies which promote development at sustainable locations. Now, I've mentioned the heritage issues. There are two listed buildings, one within the site and one immediately adjacent. The advice we've had from our heritage advisor is that there would be harm, albeit that would be less than substantial. Now, what that means in terms of the NPPF is that less than substantial harm does need to be weighed into the balance and against any public benefit from the development. Now, the only public benefit, again, going back to the Greenbelt arguments, is the only public benefit of significant weight is the contribution towards the housing land supply, albeit there is no affordable housing in this case as well. So if that argument doesn't outweigh Greenbelt harm, we've logically implied that it wouldn't outweigh the heritage harm. So the heritage harm remains, it's less than substantial, but there's no public benefit to outweigh that harm. A couple of bits and pieces. There is a flood risk issue in that there is an outstanding objection from the Council's flood risk manager, but we've considered that conditions could potentially address that concern. So that wouldn't stand as a potential objection to the scheme. So in summary, it's a Greenbelt site. We consider harm isn't clearly outweighed, therefore very special circumstances do not exist. We've considered the location of the site, we've considered it's not the most sustainable location and would be heavily reliant on the private car. And there's a heritage issue in that there is harm to designated heritage assets and the public benefit does not outweigh that harm. So putting all that together, Chair, the recommendation before you is to refuse planning permission. What I'll do is I'll stop sharing the screens and then take questions.
Okay, I'll give you a couple of moments to do that.
Okay, back to normal without the presentation, I think, hopefully, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So just one quick question. You mentioned there about the heritage site. So there's one site already here, and there is a site within the vicinity that Heritage England are slightly worried about. I would have thought in terms of the building on site that is classed as heritage, obviously the current development is already sort of surrounding that building. So I would have thought additional homes wouldn't have been that much of a concern, but the concern is there. Do you know if there was any particular thought process there? Because I can get the building in the close vicinity, but just the building that's already on site is already surrounded by the custom built homes that are already there. So I'm surprised they're putting less substantial concern in about that.
Yeah, Chair, a couple of points. The existing dwellings on site, to my knowledge, aren't custom built. I think they're general purpose housing. You're right, there are 2 listed buildings. Now, what that means is that they are designated heritage assets and have an importance by definition. One of them is, I mean, I don't want to jump back to the presentation just yet, but I can if you think it would benefit. So one of them is, you know, if you like, within the site, and there is some built development to the south and to the southeast of that site, but in terms of what's to the north and to the west of that heritage asset, there is nothing there. So there is a setting for that building. It's, as I understand it, an historic farmstead. So historically, it would have been a farm building surrounded by fields. But the other heritage asset is immediately adjacent to the site to the southwest. And again, it's partly about the setting of a listed building. So although there wouldn't be, you know, a direct impact on the, you know, the fabric of the building, so there's no, for example, demolition proposed, it's about how the heritage asset is read in its context. And the context of those buildings would have been historic farm buildings, you know, potentially within the farmstead. With the development which is proposed, it would start to enclose around the heritage asset and start affecting how that heritage asset would be read in its context, i.e. the historic context would be eroded. So that is the concern. Yes, there is existing development to the south and partly to the southeast, but this is further built development which would, you know, get to a point of eroding the significance of the setting of the asset. I think that's the point which our heritage advisor is making.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'll open it up to members. Councillor Lawrence, I can see your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just explain to me about the heritage part again? Because as it's been indicated that it's all indicative and we don't really know where they're actually going to be put, the buildings, or how they're going to look. So I can't see how it's proven that it's going to affect that part with the existing buildings what are there.
Chair, yeah, I mean, on that point, there is a site layout drawing, if you like, and I've emphasised the point that layout is reserved, so therefore you should treat it indicatively. However, I mean, it's fair to say there's a finite amount of land available for development, and there's a set number of units which are being proposed, 27. So it's reasonable to make an assumption that the indicative drawing we showed you is an indication of how the development could occur. I mean, it could be done differently, but the point is there would be inevitably some development on that part of the site, the northern part of the site closest to TM25, which is closest to the heritage asset on site. So with that in mind, our advisor has taken a view, albeit about an indicative layout, and taken a view that it is highly likely that there would be harm to the significance of that asset by way of its setting. So yes, I'm not giving you a definitive layout, but it's a reasonable assumption to make that a future layout would be broadly on those terms, because there's a finite amount of land and there's a quantum of development and you have to fit one into the other. So it's reasonable for the heritage advisor to take a view that a layout would have some impact on the heritage asset.
Thank you. It does seem a bit weak to me. It's all one person's view and how it could look and that it could be really bad. And on the other hand, you could work with the applicant and it could be really good.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I mean, ultimately, as Matt said, the complaint's gone in, but it's less than substantial harm. So there might be something to work with there. Councillor Potter, then Councillor Rice.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When you say there's a listed heritage building on the site, what is the preset radius in terms of miles or yards around a listed building that you wouldn't like to build near? Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, it doesn't work like that in terms of assessing the impact on a heritage asset. So we are required as a local planning authority to assess, for instance, the impact on the setting of a listed building. That's set out by statute within the Planning and Listed Buildings Act. I think 1991 is the act which refers to it. So it is a statutory requirement. You are required to consider whether or not a development would impact the setting of a heritage asset. So by heritage asset, I mean listed building. Heritage assets can also include conservation areas, scheduled ancient monuments, for example. But we are talking about grade 2 listed buildings, of which the borough as a whole has probably got about 150 listed buildings. So these are scarce buildings to start off with. So there isn't a distance which I can refer you to. It's each on its merits and its factored degrees. So, for example, there could be, and I'm not going to refer to any specific building in the borough, but for example, you could have a church on top of a hill, which would be visible for some miles around, and therefore development where you could conceivably read a proposed development in the context of a view towards that asset. That would be quite a wide corridor, I'd suggest. So the more visible, the more prominent the building, perhaps the greater the area of where we'd need to take that into account. So here we are talking about built development a number of meters away from the north and from the eastern boundary of the listed building, which is within the site, and then probably tens of meters away from the listed building, which is adjacent to the site. So it is a judgment, but we are required to, one, advertise these sorts of applications where there would be some impact on the setting. It is down to the individual case. Our view and the Heritage Advisor's view ultimately is that because we're talking about a few meters away, inevitably there would be some harm to the setting.
Okay, thank you. Right, I think we're on to Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew, you talk about these listed buildings and the harm it's going to do, but surely we all know the Lower Thames Crossing is going to be built near the site, and also the M25 abuts the site already. So can you explain the harm when you have two major developments going to be right next to this?
Chair, I haven't got a drawing to show the alignment of Lower Thames Crossing, but it is quite a distance to the north. It skirts around the top of South Ockenden, so I'd suggest off the top of my head 300 or 400 metres to the north, could be more. The Lower Thames Crossing, when it comes forward again, because it was submitted and then withdrawn, but no doubt it will come again, that is a nationally significant infrastructure project. So the view, I suspect, which the Secretary of State ultimately would take in balancing all of the arguments, would be if there is harm to heritage assets, and not just these ones, but any number of other heritage assets, not just in Havering, not just in Thurrock, but in Havering and also south of the river, they would take the view about, does the national interest outweigh that impact? And I would suggest to you that the M25, which has probably been there since, well, I don't know, early mid-80s now, a similar view would have been taken by the Secretary of State at that time, that yes, there could have been some harm to the heritage asset of the site. However, London Orbital Motorway has a wider public benefit. So I think it's a different scale of project you're referring to there, and it doesn't absolve the local planning authority of its responsibility to judge this one and to weigh impact on heritage assets in the balance.
Yes. And the other question, Matthew, is will this applicant be providing electric vehicle charging points?
Chair, we haven't formulated potential planning conditions because it's our clear view that there are solid reasons to refuse this application. Now, if it came to it, we could formulate conditions, but the clear officer recommendation before you is to refuse planning permission.
Yeah. What I'm driving at, Matthew, is you make a big play about people that have to drive areas. It wouldn't be very environmentally friendly. But the reality is, if this was to go ahead, and in years to come, we'd be driving electric vehicles are kinder to the environment.
Yeah, Chair. I mean, we're perhaps going on to issues of national policy about the phasing out of diesel and petrol vehicles by 20, whatever it is, 30 something. In the fullness of time, vehicles will be run. Electric vehicles will be the norm. We're not there yet. And in any case, if you want to think about it in those sorts of macro terms, then the electricity which is used to power these vehicles has to be generated somewhere, and we do need to look at our national energy policy and are we relying on fossil fuels to generate the electricity in the first place, such as gas. So there's some big questions there, aren't there? Perhaps beyond the scope of this application.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously the custom home, so it's going to be in the applicant's interest to promote that. So I'm sure that was something that's to be looked into if it's given the green light. Okay, I've got Councillor Churchman. You turn your mic on, Councillor Churchman. Thank you. Colin, are you all right? I can't hear you if you're speaking. Okay, what we'll do, we'll move on to Councillor Lawrence, then Councillor Salmons, and Wendy, in the meantime, if you could try and make contact with Councillor Churchman. So Councillor Lawrence, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't get the button on, but I'm here. I'll put my hand down, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Cheers, appreciate that. Good to have you back. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Just thinking about the design again, which Matthew was talking about, and the heritage. Like, everyone is concerned about that, same as we was with the with St Clair's Hall, with the barns what's being knocked down and the flats being put there. And we do know it does have to be in keeping. But looking at the phase one, I think the applicant has proven by doing phase one to, in an excellent way, that blends in and gives us faith and confidence to look at phase two. And I'm sure if you work with the design code, then obviously that would take even more concerns away. But what I am more concerned about tonight is that we're all trying to look at this in depth and seem fair, because we all realise that we do need to do more self-build in this area. So if we've got the attitude that it's a no-go straight away, then obviously we're not trying to work with the applicant to make this work. Because obviously I do take it that the council did get consulted by the housing secretary to give support to self-build homes. And I do know that this applicant has proven that he can be trusted to build in a certain way, which makes our environment look better and not bad. Not like a lot of new builds what are going on with these big horrible structures. It does blend in, and with the bund going round there as well, which makes it secure in the gated area. Looking at it after, I think we all got the picture sent to us where it was saying from some resident that they'd much rather have these houses rather than have a caravan site. So I think we've got to have a bit of an open mind here and try and work along with this rather than just saying no, no, no. Because we've got to work with the government because they want more self-build. And if people are out there wanting to build their own homes and get on a property ladder, then the council have got to show and match areas for them to be able to build the areas.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lawrence. And what we'll do, obviously, we're still on questions at the moment, so it's important that obviously we're asking just very short, specific questions. But I have taken on board what you're saying. I'll take that as part of your part of the debate, and then obviously bring you back in towards the end if you need to. Now we'll go on to Councillor Salmons. Have you got a question, Councillor Salmons? Thank you.
Yeah, if it's a zero carbon build, surely the people that's going to be building are going to be sympathetic with that and may already have electric vehicles. I mean, I've got friends who's already into carbon and are driving electric vehicles, bearing in mind that they're going to be phased out within the next few years. So, you know, personally, and many people like something that's maybe a little bit different, not run of the mill, like a uniform build. I think that carbon build is something that the council should be supporting, not really going against.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salmons. Yeah, again, I'm after specific questions, but I get what you're saying. That's a very good debating point. Yeah, very, very good point. But we're on questions. So, guys, when I call your name, I'm after specific questions at the moment, and then we're going to have to go to speaker statements. So it was Councillor Churchman next.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to ask Matthew a question. As you're coming from the M25 and you're going up towards Arrisdale, and you're going round the bend, was there an infill site there? I mean, I'm just asking that question.
Yeah, Chair. If I try and answer that last one first. So if you're travelling, well, essentially from Havering, funnily enough, it's the south end of sort of south end of Upminster, if you like. So you'd be going eastbound on Dennis's Lane. Yeah, you go under the M25, so you go from Havering into Thurrock. You've got fields on the left. You know, you've got farmers' fields on the left, and then you have on the right hand side, you've reached this site, which, if you look at the planning history, which is set out in the agenda, there have been some applications, and you know, you could make them out on the images. And then once you get beyond this site, the first road you get to is Arrisdale, and the next warehouse. So if you're talking about an infill development, well, you may be talking about the development which occurred on this site fairly recently, of which the planning history is set out. I mean, in point of fact, I think those were decisions taken by this committee. In terms, I think there was a proposal for conversion of some of the existing buildings and then some new build. They were both recommended for refusal. And I think they were both approved by members of this committee. So that's the only, you know, if you're travelling from Havering, that's the only site. I mean, funny enough, I drove down there earlier today. That's the only site I can think of before you actually hit South Ockenden proper. Can I pick up, Chair, just a couple of other things? I mean, the zero carbon thing. I mean, the difficulty is it's custom build, it's self build. So what guarantees have we got that it actually will be environmentally sustainable? Well, we haven't really got them at the moment, because it'd be down to an individual or group of individuals exactly what they build. So how, and again, I'm going to go back to the Greenbelt point, because although we've mentioned the members have picked up on the heritage assets things, we shouldn't underplay the fact that this is a Greenbelt site. That is a substantive policy matter, and the applicant's argument about considerations of very special circumstances, which includes zero carbon, it's hard to give you any sort of comfort or guarantee that could be delivered, because it's custom build. It's down to the individual. All they get is a serviced plot. And then after that, it's up to them. A couple of other things. Councillor Lawrence mentioned the design code. Yes, there is a design code been submitted, but as I've said in introduction, that only refers to certain elements of development, like boundary treatments, like some areas of common landscaping, and like frontage requirements. So that could be example, how wide a frontage should be. Again, it goes back to the point, it's self-build. It's down to the individual what they build. So I can't sit here and say to you, yes, it would be outstanding quality, because it's not for consideration, point one, because it's now on application. Point two, it's down to the individual. So I can't, again, going back to Greenbelt, although the applicant is relying on that as a factor, I can't give you a guarantee about the quality of the build. I'll stop there because there's lots of hands up.
Yeah, okay, I've got 5 more questions at the moment before we get round. I'm going to go to Councillor Fletcher next.
Thank you, Chair. It's just, are we saying then that there is nothing the conditions applicants will put on to by any conditions that we can put that would enforce the idea of carbon neutral housing? Are we saying there's absolutely no way of enforcing it whatsoever?
Yeah, Chair, this might be one where the council's legal officer may want to come in, because shortly before the last committee, the applicant did, and I think members were copied in, they did present a Section 106 unilateral undertaking. And within that document, there was an obligation that all houses shall be constructed to carbon neutral. Now, we need to be careful here about terminology, okay? Because building anything, residential, commercial, has a carbon footprint. Inevitably, it has a carbon footprint. So when we say carbon neutral or zero carbon, what we're talking about is during operation. And principally for a residential property, we would be talking about how that dwelling is heated and how it's lit, and does it have a carbon footprint, or is it relying on renewable energy, for example? So, and clearly in the short term, as I've said, occupiers of this development, although they may have electric cars, there's no guarantee they would have, so they would leave a carbon footprint from their various comings and goings anyway. So we do need to be careful about the terminology here. We're talking about lowering carbon emissions during operation, I think is the best way to describe it. So the applicant has offered an obligation. To my mind, that's difficult to bottom out, because it goes back to the point about self-build and custom build. It is down to the individual what they do. So what an obligation would do, and again, this is where the legal officer might want to jump in, is it reasonable, or indeed is it lawful to put in an obligation which would be picked up by an occupier or potential occupier further down the line, and they would be signing up to something which they could reasonably come back and say, well, it's self-build, I'm going to do what I want on the site. So I'm having difficulty as a planning officer to see how that would bite, and whether or not we could actually, well, whether it would be lawful ultimately. I think Caroline's got her hand up. She may comment on that point. So although there is an obligation put before you, I'd query the efficacy of that as a way forward on carbon neutral.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I haven't actually had sight of this unilateral, but I do agree with what Matthew says. And what do we mean by zero carbon? I think it's quite difficult to pin down what it is we're talking about. And I can't really say any more than that at this stage, to be honest. And the fact remains, this is a custom build, and it might be quite difficult for that to be that sort of restriction to be consistent with that approach. That's I don't really know. Not having seen that unilateral, I'm not quite sure what approach they've taken. But Matthew generally has pretty much nailed the points. I think the main points.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll go to, I've got Councillor Potter, then Councillor Byrne, then Councillor Rice, then Steve Taylor.
Oh, thank you, Chair. In terms of the extra carbon monoxide pollution that you're saying cars travelling to and from the site to the shops on a daily basis, given there's only sort of 11 type homes, in terms of percentage increase, given the M25 is visible from the site and there's a next warehouse where loads of trucks come in and out, would you agree that the percentage increase of carbon monoxide pollution is going to be around about 0.0000001%? In other words, zero. Thank you.
Chair, I think Councillor's pot is sort of maybe straying into air quality issues. Now, we haven't had any concerns raised by the Environmental Health Officer on that point. There aren't any air quality management areas within Thurrock close to the site, but as soon as you get to the east into Havering, all of Greater London is defined as an air quality management area because it's Greater London. So in fact, point of fact, I'm sitting in an air quality management area at the moment. The point we're making in the report isn't about air quality, it's about the location of the site. The site is a bit of an outlier. It's on its own, so to speak. It's in between the built-up area of South Ockendon and further afield, probably about 3 miles away, you'd be getting into the southern area of Upminster. It's on a located, access to the site is on an unlit road with no footpath. So in terms of how sustainable that location is and how easy it is for potential occupiers of that development to access facilities, it doesn't tick those boxes. And de facto, if you were a resident of that development and you needed to, pop to get the pint of milk test or the newspaper test, you wanted to pop down and get a pint of milk or a newspaper on a Sunday morning, you would jump in the car. It's as simple as that. You jump in the car. So that begins to run contrary to the thrust of national policy, which is about locating development in sustainable locations. And by that, I mean accessible by sustainable modes of transport rather than hopping in the car every time. So it's not about air quality. It's about the sustainability of the location and accessibility to non-car modes.
Can I just add something to that? Out of all the councillors at this meeting, I probably live the closest to this site, and I know, and you probably all know as well, that today North Road was closed and all the traffic from Ockendon to Upminster was being diverted down this very road, and it didn't cause any problems. So what would 11 extra houses cause? Thank you.
Chair, it's not an issue about air quality, and it's not an issue, well, subject to what the highways officer may want to say. It's not an issue about the capacity of that road. And yeah, I'm familiar with that road because I live in Havering, and when I come into the office, sometimes I use that road, and sometimes I also use North Road, depending on how busy it is. And you're quite right, it's been shut quite recently because of gasworks and all the rest of it. It's not an issue about air quality. It's not an issue about, to my mind, the capacity of the road, how much traffic is travelling on that road. It's an issue about where do we locate new development? And we should be locating new development in sustainable locations, which are accessible to a variety of means of transport. Now, on that simple principle argument, this development doesn't do it. you can't walk physically. You cannot walk from the built-up area of South Ockenden to the site. You'd be on the road, and it's as I said, it's an unlit, probably 40 or 50 mile an hour road. So that's the heart of the issue. It's not in a location which encourages sustainable modes of transport.
Okay,
or use of sustainable modes of transport.
Okay, right. So I think I've got Councillor Byrne and Councillor Rice and Steve Taylor. Now we're approaching 7 o'clock. So I'm going to have to go on to the speaker statement, and then we're going to have to start debating this one. So Councillor Byrne, please.
Yes, thank you. I mean, everything the officer just said, I think it sounds amazing. And can I put a bid in for a house? But I live directly next door to a listed building. It's a beautiful house and a lovely setting. That means no one will ever build anywhere near my house, so it proves it does work. And we can't ever put in a plan that says you can only build if you have an electric car, but I love zero carbon. I love carbon neutral, one-man band build, custom build, owner drivers, eco little man build, ticks every single box for me. So we talk about the location and we don't know where it is. So dare I say, do we need to have a look? Do I say site visit and then we can decide, because it's just a piece of land that we don't know and anywhere near it is. So it's screaming out for me, site visit and have a look.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Byrne. Obviously taking your points on board there. Obviously that's something you would be able to recommend on the debate stage. Strangely enough, it's not an area I know too well, but I do have sort of Google Earth in front of me, Street View. I do use those tools sometimes, but yeah, no, very, very valid points, and we'll see what that brings under debate. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew, you make big play about it's not sustainable, it's not local to local facilities, etc. But it's 3 or 4 minutes away from South Ockenden Station and a parade of shops. So what's more sustainable, Matthew? And you could, Matthew, ride your bike to those shops or the railway station.
Chair, I'm not going to labour the point, and Councillor Byrne, has suggested a site visit, and you may well vote to do that anyway. But yeah, I'm going to be brutally honest with you. It's a site I'm very familiar with because I live in Havering, and that part of Havering I live in, this is a route into the office. So I travelled on that road this morning. You cannot physically walk from that site to South Ockenden Station. Fact. And nor can you walk to a parade of shops. You'd have to jump in the car. Yeah, it would be a 3-minute drive to South Ockenden Station. It probably, there's a parade of shops further towards South Road, which is 200, 300 metres further on. You can take your chances on a bike there. And the highways officer might have a comment about cycle routes and all the rest of it, but it's an unlit road and it's de-restricted in terms of speed limit. It's probably 50 mile an hour, and I don't know what the sort of modelled or surveyed speeds are, but I'd suggest they'd be pretty high there. So is it attractive to somebody on a bike? Anecdotally, I'd say probably not.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rice. All right then. I'm going to go to Steve Taylor. Then I'm going to go to the speaker statement. I can see Councillor Lawrence has got a hand. I know Julian, you want to come in there, but we need to get on. So let's go to Steve Taylor, then the speaker statement, and I'll see if anyone else's hands are raised. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be very quick. I did take my hand down, but earlier Councillor Churchman asked a question about, and I think Matt might have misunderstood my interpretation of what he was saying, was there not some reclaimed land? And where he's talking about is just in the direction Matt was describing, driving from Havering towards Ockenden Station. There's a very sharp left-hand bend, and that if you didn't take the bend and went straight on, that was a tip until about 20 years ago. And it had been a tip for, well, since I was a kid, I think. It's one of the old quarries. So that land, I think that's what Colin was talking about, rather than other developments, it was reclaimed land. So that was the only point I was just trying to help out with a bit of knowledge. Thanks.
No, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. So hopefully James Bompass is with us now as the agent, and he'll be speaking in favour of this application. He's the only speaker we have on this particular item. And then once he spoke, we'll ask a few additional questions, then straight into debate. And I think we need to come to some form of conclusion. So, James, you have 3 minutes in which to present your case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening to you all. Thank you, Matt, for your presentation. So, Thurrock Council publicly declared a climate emergency on the 23rd of October in 2019. And in doing so, it made a commitment to take urgent action. The borough is committed to being carbon net zero by 2030. So in tackling this, what other projects can you point to in the borough that are acting upon this motion? How are the mainstream house builders supporting you? What better scheme with a scheme that's got proven quality? And what better than a custom build scheme where people are typically passionate and supporting the environment and embracing the latest sustainable and building methods and technology. This is a green belt site and it needs to be considered on that basis. However, we strongly believe that the benefits outweigh the harm. The scheme will provide custom build housing for the residents of Thurrock in an area where development has already previously been considered acceptable. The planning committee will know that Thurrock does not have a housing land supply and is currently preparing a local plan to be adopted in 2024 that shows 40,000 new homes, most of which will be in the Greenbelt. The pandemic has shaped the proposals. Last year we saw firsthand how people were spending more time at home, and now in lockdown 3, people are spending more money on their homes. People are investing in offices, fitness, wellbeing space, educational space, and the latest in communication technologies. This scheme embraces all of these things. Purchasers will be able to build the homes that works for them and not what Bellway or Persimmon tell them that they have to have. I want to summarise how the proposals will work. You buy a serviced plot. The plots will cost in the region of £150,000. You then apply for your own planning permission. This planning permission has to be in accordance with the design code submitted with the scheme, but you will have the ability to customise. What remains absolutely non-negotiable is that the scheme has to be zero carbon. That's in the legal agreement. You've got a copy of the unilateral undertaking, and that will be assessed against building regulations. You then build at your own pace when your finances allow. And all of these commitments, like I say, are in a legal agreement. In response to some of the questions you've asked this evening, you're a 12-minute walk from a station. It's then 4 minutes train to Lakeside. I can assure you that you can find more than a pint of milk there. In terms of upgrades, we are proposing pedestrian upgrades to the country park. You can then walk through the country park to the station. If you watched the Lower Thames Crossing video on the council website a fortnight ago, they are also upgrading this road. So I disagree with suggestions there. But the thing I want to leave on is this is 100% zero carbon, non-negotiable. I don't know why that's been lost in translation. There's a legal agreement to that effect. We will be exceeding building regulations and these properties will be zero carbon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that statement there, James. Okay, so with that, I'd like to start heading into debate unless anyone had any last questions for Matthew. No? Okay then. Right, so we'll go into debate. I'll start this evening. So when I first, I wasn't too aware of this site before I looked at it on the agenda. I actually looked at the map before I looked at the actual wording. And the first thing that came to my mind was actually it's a brand new site. But actually, when I looked, I then realised actually this is part 2 of something that was already been approved. Now, when we look at the site from Google Earth and when I look at it from Street View, it's actually quite well protected by hedgerow, almost to the extent where you can just about make the site out really, and that continues to wrap around the north and the east of the site. Then when we look to the northeast, when we look to the south, you've got the country park and quite a large turbine. And then from the left, you've got the M25. And from the M25, again, it's incredibly difficult to make out. It's very well screened. So I think in that sense, the fact that you can barely make out the site suggests to me that I can't see it having a visual impact on the countryside. And it is quite well screened. I would assume it's in the interest of the developer and the custom builds that remains that way, certainly from the M25. In terms of its remote location, I think the first few points are there are already homes there. Now, I don't believe I was part of the original application. It was a good few years ago now. I must admit, I don't think I was. I certainly can't remember it. And ultimately, as we've done before in the past, sometimes remote locations do work for people. They're actually quite secure. They're hard to get to, which generally means crime is quite low, and they're quite well protected. So they are generally quite ideal for elderly people, albeit it is quite close to the M25. Personally, I think it's a little bit too close to the M25, but you know, each person will have their own choice as to whether they build that. Just towards the end there, James mentioned about the country park. And I can see the benefit of having pathway upgrades to that park, and then from that park you can access Ockenden, albeit it is quite a walk. So we have approved developments like this quite recently. I think Langdon Hills would be an example. I think the new hospice site, which received its Section 106 money the other day, is a good example. And there's been a few developments on, I believe it was Brentwood Rose. In recent years, I said the A128 leading up towards Balvin. We've got I think there was a luxury estate built there. I think the houses are actually up for sale now. And that again was incredibly remote. So it's not something that we haven't done before. I understand that the offices are restricted, and I know that their standard is to promote these sorts of sites being close to facilities. But what I'm trying to highlight here is that, look, it's not something that we haven't done before. So in that sense, I think it's looking good. In terms of zero carbon, I mean, obviously this is something that we are pushing for more and more recently. And I think it is a case of the government, local councils, local plans really taking on board the importance of carbon zero. So what I'm trying to say there is I think that we're not quite up to date with the importance. So when we look at zero carbon having no weight, actually in the real world it does have weight, but officers legally there's nothing that they can work with there. So I think it's just being a bit ahead of its game. In terms of car movements, Councillor Potter raised an interesting point. Like, it's next to the M25. The additional car movements in terms of air quality I don't think are going to be a massive concern. Councillor Rice raised a point, in 10 years most cars will be electric. So I think any concern of additional car movements and air quality is going to be a lot less. I think for the moment that's about it, other than I am minded to support. We do have that niggling issue of the heritage concerns, but as I mentioned, they are less than substantial, and the site is completely concealed to the extent where you probably wouldn't even know it existed. So I am minded to support. It is against officer recommendations. I don't like doing it. It's something that often, strangely enough, is not often something we do. But I do think right now, on the basis that there is already a residential development there, I think this is looking like a decent site. So quite a lot of hands have gone up there. I'll hand it over to you guys, and it's up to what you think. Right, let's go to. I'm just going to have to go to the first name that's shown up here, Councillor Churchman, then Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair, but Councillor Lawrence was before me. Do you want to go first, Councillor Lawrence?
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to go along with what the Chair has just said about this project. I think it's an excellent opportunity for people who want to build their own home that fits in with their lifestyle and get on a housing ladder because of the cheaper cost, and they can build it gradually as they go along. The Housing Secretary has already written to councils and put in place measures to support councils to meet requirements around self-build custom-made homes. There is even a right to build day on the 30th of October each year. The right to build task force is endorsed by government, has been recognised in the white paper, which is called Fixing Our Broken Housing Market 2017, and they supply funding. So far, 200,000 in the last 2.5 years. So I suggest to anyone who is considering building their own home, contact our council and register, because we have a duty to match the demand. This scheme does cause harm to the green belt, but zero carbon and self-build is special circumstances, and it is also phase 2 of an exemplary design of homes in this area what fits in with the openness. It's gated and it has a bund. There's going to be paths so people can walk to the station. There's going to be electric points for car charging, and it is in a zero carbon scheme. This is outline planning permission only, and the applicant has already sent us a legal agreement known as a unilateral undertaking similar to the 106 to show best intent that they will be committed to the application if this pre-planning is granted. So I'm in favour of this application.
Okay, thank you. I think it was Councillor Byrne next. Sorry, Councillor Churchman. Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm minded to support this, but do we need a site visit? It's remote, it's eco, it's customised. It's remote, we don't know where the shops are. But if I'm going to sound very old, I can say with a ladder and some glasses, you can see to Hackney Masters. It wasn't the houses in between. So we can have a look, or I will, if we can't have a look, I will just vote for yes for it. But a site visit, because I haven't got a clue where this is or where it is, or how near the shops it is, or how near the train station is. So it's up to you, but I'm very minded to support.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, so what we'll do, I'll grab a few other opinions, Councillor Byrne, because it might be, if they want to, if members want to reject, if members want to approve, it might be that there'll be no need to go to that vote. But let me hear what others have got to say, and then we'll take it from there. So let's go to Councillor Churchman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I go past this site and looking at phase 1, I mean, these houses are amazing. And if there is a legal agreement, it's not that far from the shops and amenities. We do have these all over Thurrock. So, I mean, in a set, I really do support this because the design effect is amazing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Church. Councillor Rice.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, great play's been made that it's remote, but the reality is 12-minute walk through a country park to the railway station and to local shops is not too remote. It is, and what's exciting about it, it is actually going to be zero carbon, and that's been put into the legal undertaking the applicant's already submitted. So I think that is positive. And when you come to it, for young professional people with children, it's got to be an asset, because to buy a lump of land for 150,000 and build your own zero carbon, and it's interesting to note that we did declare a thorough climate emergency not so long ago, and this really fits into it. So I would say that, you know, I think it's got all the right areas, Chair, for us to actually approve. And I do know the area because I go to the local dentist across there, and I know that it's not that far from the through the country park when they get that walk through, that people will be able to get, you know, to the local station. And as you rightfully say, Chair, it'll only be a number of years and we'll be driving electric cars and there'll be less pollution. So I think there's a tick in the box for this one.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Churchman.
Chair, I did lower my hand. Is my hand still up? I don't know. I put my already spoke.
Sorry. Let's go to Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to keep this to be a short one. All I can say is I'm 100% in agreement with your comments at the start of these comment session. It's absolutely a brilliant scheme, and I've lived in Ockenden for the last 60 odd years, and I know this area very well, and it's going to do it well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Steve Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. It will come as no surprise because it's in the green belt that I would obviously want to speak against it. I have to say what I've seen that's there already does look nice, but people keep referring to the fact that you can see by the quality of what they've built, and I'd agree with what's there does look very good, but that isn't. They're not the people that built those are not the ones that are going to build the self-build. So what one thing looks like doesn't really bear much relation to what could be put forward in the future. So that would be my first point. So you haven't got any guarantee of quality in terms of what it's going to look like and how it fits. If you lived in a listed building, would you really want it to be surrounded by all sorts of new builds? I suspect the answer to that would be no. It's right, as the agent said, that there will be development in the Greenbelt, and I understand that, much as I'm opposed to it. But the fact is, it should be planned and a planned development. That's what the council are responsible for putting together, is a plan to enable that. But it isn't about just random bits of building somewhere on the Greenbelt because someone's bought an old farm site. That's kind of not much of a local plan, and it's very haphazard, so you don't know what you're going to end up with in terms of a big plan. And the problem, of course, is if you build on the Greenbelt, you'll never ever get it back. So it's a one-way street. And that really is probably my comments on it. As I say, it's by definition it's harmful to the Greenbelt, and that in itself is enough. So I hear what people are saying, and I don't disagree with all those comments. But I just think it's a piecemeal approach, and as a self-build, it will be even more piecemeal. It's not. There's going to be no consistency, so that worries me. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, no, thank you, Steve. I think you're very good comments that you put forward there. Yeah, I think it's what makes planning difficult. Whilst I'm in favour of this, it is against an officer recommendation. You are right. There are risks. And ultimately, yeah, it does make myself nervous that, is the decision I'm making here the right one? And everything you said there does stack up against my opinion that this will be a good development. So there are risks. It's not easy. And yeah, I've taken on board what you said. It's what makes planning difficult. We'll go to Councillor Salmons and Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favour of this build. I think we need to encourage self-builds. There's very few ever come up on the planning committee, so I think we should be supporting it. We can't really be worrying about pollution when the site is so close to the M25. I mean, people do cycle up and down lanes now. In East Tilbury, we have many people cycle, despite the fact that it's quite a narrow lane, it's dark, but it doesn't stop people cycling. And many people now have electric bikes. So I can't see a problem. It's 3 miles from facilities. It's not like they're travelling 10 miles up the road. So I am in favour of this development. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so I think I've got 2 more hands raised. I'm going to go to Councillor Byrne. I think your hand was raised again.
Yes, please, mate. I'm with you. I'm nervous about this, and I also think Councillor Rice should sack his dentist, but I am all in on this. I'm 100% loving it. Eco, it ticks every box. As an eco warrior, I'm like, yes, I can't say no.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say we have seen and will see a good many applications with less merit than this one. Yes, as the councillor.
Sorry, Councillor Fletcher.
We acknowledge. Yeah.
Councillor Fletcher, we can't hear you properly. Your mic's static. It's creating a lot of static noise. Could you try turning it off and then just turn it back on again?
Yeah. Right, tell you what, I'll take my hand down, move on without me.
Oh, I'll come back to you. Hopefully, just have a little tweak of that headphone here. Councillor Shinnick.
Yeah, I'm in favour of this self-build. The only problem is I do think that it would be good for councillors to go for a site visit, on this one. I do back Gary Bryan on that, so I'm open for a site visit, firstly.
Okay, all right. So we'll take that into consideration. What we'll do once everyone's said what they wanted to say, I'll go back to Gary, see if he still wants that site visit, and we'll take it from there. Right. I think that's everyone for the moment. Now, Mike, I can see you're back with us. Did you want to try your mic again? No, I can't hear you. Oh, hang on.
Yeah, it's all right. It took me 5 attempts to actually unmute myself. I think, to be honest, everybody else has said all the good stuff. I think particularly given the list of points that Councillor Lawrence made, yes, we acknowledge that there is harm, but I think the benefits, particularly in terms of carbon neutrality, outweigh it. And I think, yeah, for me, it's a good application.
Okay, thank you. All right then. So everyone said what they've got to say. Right, now, before we go any further, Councillor Byrne, did you want to recommend a site visit?
Yes, I would, please. I mean, in fairness to the officers who are objecting to it, and we don't know the site, I think it would be beneficial, and we're giving a fair call to the officers. So, yes, can I recommend a site visit, please? Because I'd love to see it pre-built.
Okay, yeah, no, that's perfectly acceptable. My own self, I probably won't be joining you on that, as I know the site quite well. I'm quite confident in the direction we're going, but other members may join you on that. So let's see where we end up next. So, Councillor Shinnick, you voted in favour of a site visit as well. So that's a seconder, and we can now go to the vote. Councillor Shinnick, you happy with that?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay, so Lee, I'm just going to bring you in here. Are you happy to us to go to a vote for a site visit?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if that's been put forward as a motion has been seconded, that can be voted on.
Okay, fantastic. All right, then. So I'll go around to you individually. Councillor Byrne and Councillor Shinnick are obviously in favour. So we'll go to myself, Councillor Kelly. I'm against the site visit. Councillor Fletcher.
I'm for it, Chair.
Councillor Churchman.
Having no the site, I'm against the site visit.
Councillor Lawrence.
Against.
Councillor Potter.
Against.
Councillor Rice.
Against.
Councillor Salmons.
Against.
Okay, right. I think I've got everyone there. Wendy, can you confirm that was 9 votes?
Yes, Chair. I've got 3, 4 and 6 against.
Okay, thank you. All right then. So with that, let's see where the vote goes. Now we do have a recommendation for approval. That's recommendation 8.0, and that is the committee to recommend refuse planning permission for the following reasons. And that's found on pages 25 and 26 with 3 reasons for refusal. Would anyone like to recommend refusal? Okay, I don't think there are any hands up there. Based on the conversation we've had here this evening, I've not come across anyone who's in favour of the recommendation for refusal. Okay, so that's now been defeated, and what we're looking at now is an alternative motion. Lee, just before I go to members, did you want to come in there and just confirm that you're happy for us to go to an alternative?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so just need to refer members to Chapter 5, Part 3 of the Council's Constitution. Paragraph 7.2 sets out where the committee are looking to make a decision contrary to the planning officer's recommendation. The mover of the motion should clearly specify the motion, including the reasons for departing from the officer's recommendation. Any such motion needs to be seconded, and then the planning officer should be given the opportunity to consider the implications before any vote is taken. Joe, just remind members that there's 3 reasons of refusal, and those reasons are on pages 25 and over onto page 26 of the agenda, and it's those 3 reasons that would need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do, I can see there's 2 hands raised. One's for Councillor Byrne and one's for Caroline Robbins. So I'll go to Councillor Byrne, then Caroline, I'll bring you in.
Hello, yes, I don't know if I can propose this or not, but Councillor Rice is the master of getting plans like this through, so I would leave it to him and leave it to his expertise, because yeah, he's a million times better than me at it. But if I can propose it, fine. If not, let Councillor Rice propose it, because I'm relying on him.
Yeah, well, let's hear from Caroline first, and then I'll open it up.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming now that you're going to there will be a proposal to vote against officer recommendation. So obviously it's a greenbelt site. So as usual, I remind you as to the sort of the steps you have to take. The balancing exercise has to be undertaken, and so you've got to give substantial weight to the greenbelt harm. And then you have to look at all the other, all the harms together, and then, state the benefits, and then you have to do the balancing exercise and ask the question: do the benefits clearly outweigh the harm? As I say, don't forget to say that there is substantial harm for the green belt, and then in addition, you've got 2 other reasons for refusal, and each has to be addressed individually. For example, a heritage asset, the test here is: do the public benefits outweigh the harm to the heritage asset? So you'd need to tackle that, and then you've got the second reason for refusal, which is to do with sustainable development, and you'll need to tackle that one as well. Come back to me if you need any help along the way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Caroline. So, yeah, what we'll do, Councillor Rice, I know you was quite passionate about it. What I'll do, I'll start with yourself if you wanted to come forward with an alternative recommendation. Obviously, if you wanted to start with acknowledging that there is harm to the green belt, if you then want to come in with your reasons, and I'll myself and probably Councillor Lawrence will follow you up. So if you'd like to start, thank you.
Yes, well, obviously there is harm to the green belt. We recognise that. I think the first consideration must be the council doesn't have a 5-year land supply or a 20% buffer. Those are very important, and I would actually give those significant weight. Now, then we move on to the carbon neutral and the custom built. I think we ought to allow that significant weight as well, because the carbon neutral is very important, particularly as this council has only recently passed motions to admit that Thurrock faces a Thurrock climate emergency. So I think we're getting there. And then when we look at areas, other areas, Chair, we're looking at, for for instance, this Thurrock is an area of national growth area, and we do currently have 3 port applications on the table with the government. So I think we have to recognise that, and I think we should give that significant weight. And we should also recognise that it'll only be, once the path is done through the local country park, it's only 12 minutes to the local shops and obviously to the railway station. So it is sustainable, because those shops, there's a co-op there, there's a dentist there, and numerous other shops there, so that, you know, people could get a bit of shopping there. So I think that's my initial feeling. Obviously, I'll pass back to you for some additional ones, and let's see where we go.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rice. So to follow up there, first and foremost, I'll pick up on the point of access. Now, I know that we have recently, I understand the concern from officers that it is in a remote location, and at the moment, the only option is to travel by car to and from. As Councillor Rice mentioned, there is a commitment there to have a pathway to the park, which would then allow you walking accessibility to the station and local amenities, albeit I understand there's an idea it's 12 to 15 minutes. I do acknowledge that it's not the shortest walk, but it's still accessible. And that's also in line with some developments we've approved off very similar roads here in Thurrock. And I would draw the committee's attention to Langdon Hills Golf Course and the hospice site, which I understand received its Section 106 recently, which is obviously fantastic news for everyone involved in that project. So whilst I acknowledge that, you know, there is an issue with highways, those sites were quite large in their scale, and this is a lot more scaled down. So in that sense, I'm confident that we can say, based on previous decisions, we can isolate that issue. And then, of course, it comes to the heritage asset. Now, the heritage assets themselves have expressed that the harm is less than substantial. As I've mentioned, the site itself is secluded. I've gone on Google Street View, and it is incredibly difficult to sight the site from the north, the east, the M25. And the only way it's not covered by screening is where the park is, which is the northeast west, and there obviously is a large wind farm there. So, for me, I don't acknowledge that less than substantial harm is enough for refusal. And in addition to that, officers, obviously, you know, zero carbon, the debate around the developments. I know we're a little bit behind on our local plan, but clearly there is a desire from the committee to promote zero carbon, and hopefully that will be acknowledged in years to come as government guidance comes forward, and as our local plan progresses. That actually, if developers want to build in Thurrock and they want to build zero carbon, then that's something that I think, you know, we can reasonably look favourably upon. Okay, so that's what I've got to add. Lee, would you like to come back there and just give us your once over of those?
Thank you, Chair. Oh, Councillor Lawrence, I think, wanted to come in.
Sorry, Councillor Lawrence.
Sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if it could be explained to me, just that I thought, wouldn't approval subject to the Secretary of State and the unilateral undertaking conditions be taken into account? Because we had that thing sent to us, didn't we, about the unilateral conditions? Could that be explained to me? I thought it might simplify it tonight rather than trying to find reasons and things like that.
Lee, did you have anything to add to what Councillor Lawrence said there?
Yes, Chair. So what I've just recorded is, if I just sort of go back one, but what I've just recorded as the committee's sort of factors is a 5-year housing supply, 20% buffer, which is being afforded significant weight, carbon neutral / zero carbon, again significant weight, a national growth area, recognition of growth in the borough, again given significant weight. So those were the factors I had recorded for the first reason for refusal, which is the greenbelt reason. And then the second reason for refusal is that members are feeling that the pathway that's being promoted, which would provide some accessibility away from the site into South Ockenden, would address the second reason for refusal. And the third reason for refusal around impact to listed building is that because you consider, because there's less than substantial weight, the site being secluded, that in itself is enough to address that reason. Was there anything else, Chair, that you wanted to put into that, or did I miss?
It was just to point out. Obviously, there was another one, and it's the role of the application site in the greenbelt. I know you've given it very limited weight. I'm not sure we can give that significant weight, but I would like that together with the others added.
Okay. I can see that Matt's got his hand up. So I just wonder whether, just before I sum up on that point, just whether, Chair, whether Matt wants to come back in.
Yeah, Matt, would you like to come in, please? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I don't want to delay things any longer than they need to be, but there's a few things I will respond to because I think they are important. So several members made reference to the visibility of the site in terms of greenbelt. So this is a greenbelt point. So they made reference to hedgerow screening, a bund around the site, etc. I've probably said this to you before, committee, in that there was a Supreme Court judgment last year, that's the highest court in the land, which considered the matter of visual harm as opposed to spatial harm to the greenbelt. And basically the conclusion of that Supreme Court judgment was, put simply, the fact you can't see a site in the greenbelt is academic, because openness, which is what the greenbelt is all about, is a spatial designation. So to my mind, and to the mind of the Supreme Court, the fact that you can't see a site in the greenbelt or it's partially obscured is academic. It is a spatial designation. It's about keeping land open. So you do need to factor that into your considerations. Second point, briefly, some mentions been made about phasing and phase 1 and phase 2. I don't think the existing development on the site, which was originally granted planning permission probably 6 or 7 years ago, I don't think it was ever badged as phase 1. So this is, to my mind, it isn't a multi-phase development. So I think that's slightly confusing and perhaps an error to say this is phase 2 of a 2-phase development. The zero carbon thing, all I'm going to say, because we've laboured that point, all the applicant has done is present a Section 106 unilateral undertakings. That's a one-sided Section 106 agreement. So basically means they sign up to obligations, the council doesn't. All it says, all houses shall be constructed to carbon neutral. Now, I've said we need to unpick that because it's difficult to square that with custom build, because custom build is about an individual or a group of individuals acquiring a plot and essentially doing what they want. Now, it's not inconceivable that an individual would say, well, I'm not interested because I want to do what I want. I don't want to do carbon neutral. There could be other people who say, yeah, that's fine, I want to do it. So I'd suggest we probably need to unpick that and understand exactly what it means and whether or not it holds any weight as an obligation in the first place. Couple of quick ones very quickly. Yes, there is support for self-build in NPPF. And there was a self-build act from about 2015. So yes, we have to keep the register. but we shouldn't be double counting that. It's a component of housing land supply to which we've already given significant weight. You know, we haven't underplayed that. We've said we haven't got a housing land supply. We've given it significant weight, but we don't think it tips the balance. The final one, references we've made to the country park, and yes, Stephen Taylor corrected me earlier on that. Yes, there's the former Little Bellis landfill site to the south, where permission was granted by the Development Corporation several years ago to remediate that and to open it up as a country park. That operation is ongoing and will finish, is scheduled to finish at the end of next year. The northern part of the country park is open. And in the fullness of time, when the complete park is developed, it will be handed over to an environmental charity. Now, I think off the top of my head, because I've had some dealings with it, it could be Essex Wildlife Trust. But until those arrangements are finalised, I couldn't tell you about the legality of access arrangements. So yes, you can walk through the country park, but I have no idea whether or not that's a permanent arrangement, whether or not it's grace and favour arrangement, whether or not it'd be restricted at certain times of the day, whether or not it'd be restricted at certain times of the year. So again, although that's down in the unilateral undertaking, I'd suggest we probably need to unpick that and understand exactly what it means before an agreement is signed. Just one more thing on the self-build thing. Yes, we did have an approval for self-build at Greenwise Nursery, which was in February 2020 consented. That was 31 custom build units. We are currently considering an application to revise that scheme and to reduce the number of custom build units to 18 custom build units. Anecdotally, that might be an indication that there's perhaps less demand for that sort of accommodation than some would suggest. Thank you, Chair.
And I thank you, Matthew. That's very helpful. So breaking it down a little bit what you said. So first of all, I was, as you mentioned, I did say phase one, phase two. I probably often need to be careful with my wording. What I was trying to highlight was obviously you have the Kemp's Farm, which is a heritage building, which is obviously there a very long time. And then recently we've had a development next to that. So effectively, instead of using the term phase one and phase two, what I'm trying to highlight is there is a development that's taken place in recent years. And obviously that sort of approval, it got approval, and this is an add-on almost around the site. So yeah, I'll hold my hand up there. It's not phase one, not phase two. Obviously, in terms of the zero carbon, obviously we heard from the agent there that there is obviously a very strict legal agreement that the custom build homes should and will strive to be carbon. I mean, look, ultimately, planning is difficult. As you know, I'm a dock worker. I'm not, I don't have a degree in planning, but to me, that sounded quite concrete that we can have confidence that this developer will stick to that, and if people want to move into these homes, then yeah, that is what's going to be in the package. So I understand it needs to be unpicked. I'm sure if it was given approval that the council could work with the developer, and not that we should add anything to this, but look, clearly when you look at the development that took place next to Kemp's Farm a few years ago, this is we are looking at a developers, obviously takes pride in what they do. Right, now I had a lot of hands up, so let me see if I can let's see where I can go to first. Councillor Rice, did you have your hand up? Then Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Chair. All I was going to say, I appreciate what Matthew said. The zero carbon, I think that should be significant weight. And it should be put in zero carbon backed up by a Section 106 undertaking, so that we make it absolutely clear to the applicant where we're driving.
Okay, thank you. And then Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I know I probably didn't make myself very clear earlier about the unilateral agreement what the applicant sent to us all, and I understand that I probably confused Lee because he didn't really answer what I said. My understanding of it is, because I did try and look it up when it was sent to me to try and understand it. I think the idea is that we don't need to go along with the 106 agreement, which takes ages and ages and ages. I think the idea is that the agreement is subject and approved to the unilateral agreement. So everything the council wants and what they've asked for is already written in a legal agreement.
Okay, thank you. Right, Caroline, I can see your hands raised. Would you like to come in there for us, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just going back to the heritage asset, the test is to do with public benefit, because I think it was just, it's in a secluded site. That doesn't actually address, the test in the NPPF. So if I could just put that back for you to pick up. And the other thing on this path, now, Matthew was saying about the country park, and he there doesn't seem to be any evidence at the moment that there is definitely within the control of the applicant to actually have a path. I mean, normally with a path, you'd want to know what surfacing and stuff like that is as well, wouldn't you? Can I just ask if I suppose I can't really ask at this point, can I? But basically, if the path is not secured by some right, we can't really take it into account because it's over land that's in the control of a third party, and it might not be secured. So I don't think this should be taken into account because it might not happen. You see, it's not within the control of the applicant. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that, Caroline. So, yeah, you do raise a good point, and I understand what you're saying now. I think in being realistic, obviously the developer is keen to contribute to a pathway, and if you look on Google Street View, that is very easily accessible. I mean, it's not gated off. Now, you are right. Legally, yeah, maybe we wouldn't be able to put that, but ultimately, when I look at Langdon Hills, the example as I was coming up with, such as the hospice site, such as the golf club, I mean, they don't have paths anyway. I think we were drawn to that as a sort of an additional benefit, but ultimately, it's clear that this is going to be a site that's accessible by car. So it's good that there is a commitment from the developer to put a pathway in there, and but it's not, had the developer said we're not going to put a pathway in, then that would not have changed my opinion as it had not done with Langdon Hills or the hospice site. Councillor Rice, in terms of, obviously, I raised the issues of heritage. I think Caroline there was after public benefit. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, Chair, we talk about 300 to 400 yards away, 300 to 400 metres, that's what we were told. I would hardly think there would be substantial damage done to those listed buildings when you take into consideration the M25 is so close. I just cannot see that, Chair. So I would put that down as as a reason, and obviously you could follow that up.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rice. So yeah, I mean, in terms of heritage, obviously they put it in themselves that it's less than substantial. When we're looking at the benefit of this particular site, clearly these custom built homes are going to be available to the public. It's going to give the public choice as to what they or sort of a new type of build. I mean, ultimately, it's going to give, hopefully, elderly people access to a secure remote location. It gives choice, and ultimately, choice is limited. Sometimes it's not all about having these developments in near the town centres. People want security, and that's particularly what this site might provide. Now, I mean, I don't personally have too much more to add to that. Lee, is this a case of us going to the vote, you taking it away, assessing what we've done, and then coming back at a later date?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that is the case. I mean, the point around the impact on the listed building is covered on paragraph 6.48 to 6.49 in the report, and that refers to the NPPF, which basically says that where development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm, the significance of a designated heritage asset, the harm should be weighed against the public benefits, which blah, 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 and then goes on to say assessment is a matter of judgment. And the officers are saying the only factor that can be considered public benefit is the ability to positively contribute towards housing land supply, which obviously we've given weight to. Chair, you've just sort of extended that point just at the last thing you said, which talks about the choice of custom build in it being in a secure location. So I think we can recall that down as part of the factors. I think what I'd like us to do is to get into a little bit more detail around the legal agreements, just to make sure that we can put the suitable controls in place to make sure that this is a zero carbon scheme. And also to look into this footpath issue as well. Matt's quite rightly pointed out around some of the legalities around access when it connects into the park. So I think it's just worth exploring those. So if members go to the vote and are minded to go against the recommendation, we'll get a report back as soon as we can, outlining implications and to set out controls.
Okay then, sounds good to me. So with that, I think we should look to go to the vote. So first off, Councillor Rice, you've proposed that recommendation for approval with the reasons set out as we've raised them. Councillor Byrne, did you want to come in a second there?
Yes, please, mate.
Excellent. Okay, that's seconded by Councillor Byrne. So with that, we'll head to the vote. Now, this will be a vote for approval, subject to officers taking that report away, coming back. I think someone's mic's just gone on there. Who's that? Is that yours, Councillor Fletcher? Yeah, excellent. Thank you. All right then. So with that, obviously that's been recommended by Councillor Rice and Councillor Byrne. So we'll now go to the vote, and I'll come round to you one by one. And this is a vote to approve Kemp's Farm. That's 20/01394/OUT. So we'll go to myself, Councillor Kelly. I'll be approving that. Councillor Fletcher.
Approve.
Councillor Churchman.
Approve.
Councillor Lawrence.
Approve.
Councillor Potter.
Approve.
Councillor Salmons.
Approve.
And then Councillor Shinnick.
Against.
Against, okay. All right then, so with the exception of Councillor Shinnick, all other 8 members on the planning committee were in favour of that. So we can say Kemp's Farm, Dennis's Lane, South Ockenden, found on pages 5 to 28, 20/01394/OUT has been approved, subject to an officer's coming back to us at a later date. Okay, now with that, it's now 7:55. What I'd like to propose, obviously, we've got quite a large application coming up. So if anyone wanted to have a quick bathroom break, and if we could try and reconvene at 8 p.m. Okay, so 8 p.m. sharp, and that would give you 5 minutes. Okay, so Wendy, are you happy for me to adjourn there? Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, so that's in German for 5 minutes. So 8 p.m. sharp. I'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Live, Chair.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for that. It's now 1 minute past 8, and we can now reconvene the planning committee. We've got 2 more items on the agenda this evening. That's item 7 and item 8. Before we go any further, the meeting is supposed to finish at 8:30. So what I'd like to do is suspend standing orders until the close of play, which gives us the opportunity to debate the next 2 items for the rest of the evening. Are we happy?
Yeah, secondly.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, agreed.
Excellent.
Agreed.
Excellent. Okay then. All right. Excellent. Okay then. Right. So with that, that then takes us on to item 7, 19/01418/FUL, Thurrock Football Club, Ship Lane, Averley, found on pages 29 to 62 on the agenda. Matt, would you be so kind as to present a report? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's a bit of housekeeping, I'm afraid, with this one now. I think members have declared receipt of correspondence, but probably for the purposes of the minutes, it's probably best to whiz through. So officers have received 5 late letters objecting to the application, and one of them, you bear with me, one of them is from Councillor Van Day. I think it's basically points already referred to in the report, so I'm not going to read through 5 letters, but suffice it to say it's concerns which are already reported before you. And in addition to that, I've received letters of support for the application. I will whiz through. One of them is from Councillor Kerrin, and then we've had letters of support from representatives of Grays Athletic Football Club, 6 in total. A letter from the CEO of Treetops Learning Academy in support, and also from a private individual in support. The letter from the agent, which was received a couple of days ago, I'm not going to read it all out, it's 4 pages, but it does ask officers to point out that the proposed financial contribution reported within the report of £500,000 is now increased by £50,000. No, sorry, I beg your pardon, I've misread that. So there's already a financial contribution towards Bellis Park and sports pitches. This is a sum of £50,000 to be payable to the council for additional highway improvement works on Ship Lane / the local area. So it's not something we've reported, but that's an offer of £50,000 for highways improvements. So that's the housekeeping.
Actually, thank you, Matt. Sorry, just briefly, I've got a housekeeping item as well. We've got a speaker objector, and the agent speaking in favour. Councillor Van Day did submit a request to speak against, but strangely enough, because the walled boundary falls into West Thurrock and South Stifford, he's unable to speak out against because there is already a resident objector. One of the councillors for West Thurrock and South Stifford could have actually come in and spoke in favour or against, but because Councillor Van Day wasn't in his ward boundary, we rejected his request. I could have used chairman's discretion, but I couldn't really find a special circumstance there. Luckily, David has emailed us all, so I just wanted to highlight that to anyone listening in as to why there's no councillor speaking. Yeah, it's quite a unique situation because it really impacts Averley, but it's actually in the West Thurrock and South Stifford ward. Sorry about that, Matt. I just wanted to get that in there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So if I hopefully go into the presentation, bear with me. Okay. So hopefully you're seeing a PDF which I'll run through. So the site before you for this item is the site of the former Thurrock Football Club. I say former because they ceased operations at the end of the 2017-2018 football season. So their former stadium site has been vacant since. So that's an ordnance survey showing the site. You can make out the M25 or A282 as it is there, I think, to the eastern boundary. Junction 31 of the M25 is off there to the south, and then you've got the A13 and the cutting on the top left-hand corner. And if I show the next image, which is a Google Earth image, you can make out quite clearly a football stadium, which is the former Thurrock FC Stadium, an area of unused land which is off there to the east and northeast of the stadium, and then to the north of the stadium there is an open area which was formerly used as practice pitches by the football club. Now, the red line, the site area, if I jump back, includes all of those 3 distinct elements of the site. In terms of local plan designation, that's an extract from the adopted local plan and shows quite clearly that all of the application site is within the metropolitan greenbelt. And the proposal you have before you, the description of the development refers to retention of the former Thurrock football stadium for ongoing football use. It's worth pointing out, in planning terms, that isn't operational development. That isn't development requiring planning permission. The football stadium is already there. It's a lawful use. It was operational until fairly recently. Strictly speaking, planning permission isn't required to reuse a stadium which is already in existence. So in terms of the operational development, what the application proposes is 2 elements. Firstly, on the former football club clubhouse building, which I'm trying to highlight there, if you can make out, there is a first floor flat, residential flat, and the proposal includes a change of use of that flat to football related purposes, if you like, so it would be used for meetings, etc., associated with the football use. And the second element, which is the more substantial element of the proposal, is what's called a PDI centre, and that's a pre-delivery and inspection use. So basically what that means is vehicles, new vehicles, some used vehicles as well, would be imported to the site by transporter. They would be stored on that site. You can make out that large area of car parking, which is about 1,200 or so parking spaces. And then before distribution to car dealerships, the vehicles would be road tested, they would be checked, they'd have their pre-delivery inspections, and that would take place in that building, which is highlighted there, the pink building, which is a Part 2-storey building of about 1,200 square metres floor space. So in terms of the, actually I'll run through the rest of the presentation. So that's the building which will be on site. As I said, it's Part 2-storey, and you can make out on the bottom drawing there some of the car parking bays where vehicles will be inspected and tested, etc., prior to delivery. That's some elevations of the building. It is quite utilitarian in appearance. That's the existing clubhouse, so that's the change of use. There's an existing first floor flat there, and the proposal includes change of use from a residential use to a use, an office type use in theory. Actually, let me just check the description to make sure I've got that absolutely right. Sorry, that would be a Class 2, a D2 use, which would be an assembly and leisure type use. So it'd be used for purposes associated with the existing use as a football stadium. And the proposals also include reference within the report a turnaround for HGV vehicles. There are a series of pictures, so these focus principally on the operational development, that is the PDI facility, which would be on the site of existing or former training pitches associated with the former Thurrock Football Club. So that's taken on the practice pitches looking west, looking towards Ship Lane, and you can make out the open nature of the site clearly. Looking in the other direction, back towards the A282, which you may be able to make out sort of on the skyline. So again, it's just showing the open nature of the site, which was formerly practice pitches for football. Showing the relationship with the Mardyke, which is at a slightly lower level off to the right-hand side. Again, that's looking towards Ship Lane. And then looking in the other direction, showing the change in levels between the site and the Mardyke on the left-hand side of that picture. A wider view, so that's taken from basically from the Ship Lane end of the site, looking across the full width of the site. You can make out the floodlighting columns for the former football club in the background there, and possibly elements of the A282 as well on the skyline. That's the clubhouse building. The reason we put that into the presentation is to say, you know, there is an element of change of use, and that would be the first floor of that building. But as I said, the predominant element of development would be the PDI with a 1,200 space car park and a a building of around about 1,200 square metres floor space. I think it's worth showing that drawing. That's the existing access into the football club site. That also serves as access to the Thurrock Hotel. Just to finish off, there's a couple from the south, beg your pardon, from the north. So the Mardyke Valley includes a public right-of-way, so that's a footpath, cycleway, bridleway, and from that public right-of-way you can look towards the site. So that's taken from the public right-of-way, and you can again make out the floodlighting columns on the background there. Similar sort of view. So the proposed PDI facility would be ahead of the skyline, if you like, there. So roughly what I'm trying to indicate there. I think there might be one more picture. Yes, showing a similar view. So they're the public views which would can be taken towards the site. So in terms of the issues, as I've set out, the site is within the greenbelt. It's also within the high-risk flood zone, and it also adjoins an air quality management area. So in terms of greenbelt, although the application refers to the reuse of the football stadium, in point of fact, that doesn't require planning permission. It's not operational development in the within the meaning of development which is set out within the Planning Act. So in terms of what the operational development is, we are talking about the change of use of the flat. Now, in terms of the how greenbelt policies work, because that clubhouse building already exists and the changes would only be internal, there is no greenbelt implication there, and therefore it's appropriate development. However, the proposed PDI facility, so that's the 1,200 space car park and the new building, that would be inappropriate development within the greenbelt. The various exceptions to the categorisation of inappropriate do not apply in this particular case. There's also that extensive car parking area, which I've referred to, which is about 1,200 spaces and associated fencing, etc. Now, although that isn't a building operation, it is an engineering operation, and what the NPPF says is that if there would be harm to either the openness of the greenbelt or the purposes of the greenbelt, then that has to be defined as inappropriate development. Now, we've considered that we've taken a view that the site is an existing open area of greenbelt. You know, it's an open area of grassland, which was formerly used for training pitches, and putting down an area of hard standing to store vehicles and putting up associated fencing would harm openness. So therefore, we've concluded that the car park, as well as the building, is inappropriate development. Now, being inappropriate development, that is harmful by definition. We've concluded there would be harm to both the spatial and visual aspects of the greenbelt. Now, just harking back to the previous item, I did mention that greenbelt is primarily a spatial designation. The fact that the site is open is the key factor. If a site is open, it doesn't really have to justify its greenbelt existence beyond that. So there is harm to openness, and we've assessed the application against greenbelt purposes, and we've concluded that there are varying degrees of harm up to 3 of those purposes. So adding that harm together, substantial weight has to be afforded to harm to the greenbelt. Now, as ever, it's the balancing exercise for greenbelt, so the applicant has put forward a number of considerations which they consider would amount to very special circumstances, and they're set out within the report and analysed within the report. Now, one of the factors of the application the applicant refers to is the gifting of the stadium to Grays Athletic Football Club. It's worth pointing out when the application was first submitted towards the end of 2019, the proposal didn't include the gifting of the football stadium to Grays Athletic. What it did propose originally was changing the grass pitch to a 3G pitch, and then making that 3G pitch and the associated clubhouse, stands, changing rooms available for community use. But the current proposal is to gift the stadium to Grays Athletic Football Club. Now, I've mentioned already that the reuse of the stadium is an operational development. It's not development requiring planning permission. There would be some benefit clearly in having any vacant use occupied, so that the reuse of the stadium doesn't necessarily weigh against the proposals. But the reuse of the stadium isn't a planning event. The stadium could be reused at any point without reference to the local planning authority and without reference to a planning application. The applicant is offering something called a community use agreement, and members will be familiar with these sorts of agreements. So new school facilities, for example, we routinely ask for community use agreements. Now, potentially that is a new benefit because the former football club, the former Thurrock Football Club, we're not aware that there was a community use agreement. So you can count that as a new benefit. We do have a query about the carrying capacity of the football pitch. It is a grass pitch. There would be wear and tear on the pitch, and it would be a grass pitch which would be marked out for adult-sized football. So in terms of wider community benefit, there is a factor to be taken into account about how many hours of community use a grass pitch could sustain compared, for example, to an artificial pitch. And it was marked out as an adult pitch, so it wouldn't be remarked during its operation for youth football or under sevens football or mini football. So with that sort of caveat, there is some benefit, and there is some benefit in terms of the clubhouse and how that could be available more widely to community. So although that factor does attract some weight, we consider that to be fairly limited. And the key point here is that it is the PDI facility which attracts the need for planning permission in this case. That is the operational development which is before you for consideration tonight. The second factor referred to by the applicant is financial contributions. So I've mentioned a £50,000 contribution, which has only just emerged in the past day or so, which would be spent towards highways improvements. The applicant is also referring to a contribution towards pitch provision, that's playing pitch provision at Bellas Park. Now, we've set out within a report because playing pitches are involved, and the proposal for the PDI would build on the site of former playing pitches. We had to consult Sport England, they're a statutory consultee, and their response was that there are no objections subject to a financial contribution to mitigate the loss of those pitches. So in straight terms, that contribution would be spent at Bellas Park, because that's one of the council's identified sports hubs, as mitigation to replace existing pitches. So the weight which can be afforded to that is limited in those circumstances, as it is mitigation. It is not necessarily enhanced provision compared with what's there. Now, I think the applicant, certainly in their most recent letter, which I received the other day, sort of referred to, well, there's the potential for 3G facilities at Bellas Park. Yes, there is a potential. The last time I looked at the Sport England website for the cost of a 3G pitch, it's more than 500,000. In fact, it's probably near £800,000 or £900,000. So just to be clear on that point, that financial contribution wouldn't necessarily on its own get you a replacement 3G pitch, but it would get you replacement grass pitches at Bellas Park. So going back to the Green Dart argument, yes, it's about mitigation. Therefore, the positive weight you can put on that factor we consider is fairly limited. I've mentioned the HGV turnaround. So some members will be aware of an issue which currently exists in Ship Lane, where HGVs exit at junction 31, and it's usually the case that their sat-nav device or their smartphone tells them to head north along Ship Lane, because that's the shortest route to their destination. Unfortunately, there are weight restrictions, and there's also a fairly tight geometry when you get to the top end of Ship Lane. So it's not desirable for HGVs to use that route, and the preferred route is to go to junction, stay on the A13 and then use Sandy Lane, etc., because that's a designated B road. On that point, I mean, the issue about HGVs on Ship Lane is well known to the council. Indeed, our colleagues in Highways undertook a public consultation in the early part of 2019, and that did identify a preferred option about how that issue can be resolved. We've put limited positive weight on that factor because, as I said, the council is aware of it and has been consulting and formulating ideas about how that issue could be resolved. It's worth also pointing out that if that particular facility were to be secured, for example, through a Section 106, well, there are relevant policy tests set out in the NPPF which would have to apply. Those three tests being that the mitigation, i.e. potentially the HGV turnaround, wouldn't have to be necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. It would have to be directly related to development, and it would have to be fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind of development. Now, based on those tests, it's highly questionable whether or not an HGV turnaround would tick those boxes. The final issue referred to by the applicant is job creation, and the application form suggests that during operation of the development, there would be between 15 and 30 full-time equivalent jobs. Now, obviously, there would be some short-term employment benefit during construction, and that should be factored in, and certainly that would contribute towards the economic limb of the definition of sustainable development. However, that wouldn't outweigh the environmental limb, and by the environmental limb of sustainable development, I'm referring here to Greenbelt. It could be, indeed the applicant is arguing that it's a windfall site, so it's a site which hasn't been identified, therefore those 15 or 30 or somewhere in between jobs should be considered as a windfall benefit. But what we've done in terms of the report, just for the purposes of comparison, is make some sort of comparison about if that was a site in one of our designated employment areas, what would the likely employment generation be? And in comparison, it does come out fairly low in if you undertake that sort of comparison, because as I've set out and as you've seen on the plans, there's a 1,200 space car park. That is a land hungry use, and in terms of employment densities, that really doesn't maximize the use of the site. So that was just for the purposes of comparison. So you can put some limited positive weight on that as a factor. So as ever, you need to weigh all that together. You need to weigh the substantial harm to the Greenbelt against the factors promoted by the applicant. We've concluded that only limited positive weight, or indeed no weight, should be attached to some of the benefits. So our view is that harm isn't clearly outweighed by other considerations, and that is the policy test. Harm needs to be clearly outweighed, such that very special circumstances do not apply. Turning briefly to other issues, part of the reason why it's taken so long to get this application before a planning committee is because of the proximity of the site to junction 31, and indeed by extension to junction 30. Obviously, they're Highways England assets, and Highways England have been a consultee in the process. In summary, as a range of additional highways information was submitted by the applicant, Highways England are now in a position where they do not object to the proposal, subject to conditions. So they consider that the impact on their network would be acceptable, subject to conditions. In terms of the Highways Officer, the local Highways Authority, the Thurrock Highways Officer, similarly subject to mitigation, which could be secured via condition. And the reason I hesitated there, because the applicant is now offering £50,000, and we'd have to see where that money could be spent, or indeed if it could be legitimately spent. But subject to conditions, there are no highways objections from either the local authority or from the strategic authority. In terms of layout and design, there is a new building proposed. You did see the elevation. It is quite utilitarian. It's quite functional as a building. Although the applicant has referred to potential for landscaping, well, we know that landscaping can take time to develop. So although views towards that building from the public right-of-way could be potentially screened in time, we don't consider that the the appearance of the building, the design of the building, necessarily weighs in favour of the proposals, and members, of course, will be aware of the importance of good design, which is set out in both local and national policy. There are no ecological issues with the site. It's not with an area with a known ecological importance. In terms of amenity, the nearest sort of sensitive receptor would be potentially occupiers or residents of the Thurrock Hotel, which is to the south. We've considered there wouldn't be a material impact on potential residents of or occupiers of the hotel. Yes, there would be movements associated with vehicles being delivered, vehicles being road tested, etc. But in the grand scheme of things, that's probably not going to be a substantial impact in terms of amenity. The final issue, which I'll run through, is about flood risk. So it's within the high risk flood zone. We did consult the Environment Agency, and the response came back basically is they don't object. However, the site being within the high risk flood zone, we are required as the local planning authority to apply what's called the sequential test for flooding. And what that basically means is development should always be located wherever possible in sites of the lowest risk of flooding. And there is a test which we have to apply in this case, because the site is an unallocated site. So it's not a site within our employment areas or regeneration areas where we've already applied that sequential test something called the strategic flood risk assessment. Now, the applicant within about the past 2 weeks submitted what was called a flood sequential test report. And what that is information which will assist the local planning authority in applying the test. Now, I've looked through that report, and in particular what's section 5 of the report, which is the actual test element itself. Now, looking at the guidance which the Environment Agency provides about how the test should be applied and the level of information which we should require to apply that test, it's still the case that we don't consider there's enough information to reasonably apply the test. So looking at the recommendation before you, in addition to the substantive greenbelt issue, which does form a reason for refusal, there is still an issue about inadequate information or missing information, which would enable the local planning authority to safely undertake a sequential test for flooding. So that forms the second reason for refusal. Adding all that together, Chair, you have a recommendation to refuse planning permission. I'll stop sharing the screen and stop there.
Okay, thank you, Matt. All right then, so let's get into it. I'll ask a couple of questions and I'll go on to Councillor Fletcher. So first of all, Matt, bringing your attention to page 52-53. Obviously, a lot's been made. Clearly, the residents of Aveley have had to put up with a lot of HG movements over the years. The developer is suggesting here that by having the turning circle to the right, that should alleviate some of the HGV problems, because once the HGVs go down Ship Lane, there's no real way for them to turn. But then I suppose it should also be acknowledged that some of these people are repeat offenders, and on the basis that it's shorter access to the locations they're actually trying to get to, at the moment, that right turn is probably, I can see it's going to have some benefit, but it's not going to be a silver bullet that solves the problem. Now, in addition to that, looking at page 52, the council have acknowledged that there is a problem. They've gone out to consultation and they're suggesting that the best option would be a roundabout adjacent to the site. Now, I can see how a roundabout would help, because what you could do, once you've got the roundabout, first of all, there's no excuse for the HGV drivers not to turn back. Second of all of a sudden, you've then got a starting point to a weight-limited road where you can have signs and a speed camera. And we do have the technology now for the cameras that solely pick up on HGVs that shouldn't be using access roads, that they're not. So that is one potential way that you could alleviate that problem. And I know on the I think it's the M48 Old Severn Bridge, they've actually got that technology up and running because they don't want the HGVs using the bridge when it's windy. Now, on the report here, it says that maybe we can't really add too much weight to the developer having a turning circle, because the council's actually going to, in a future date, get this issue fixed. But speaking to the council, there's no funds available. So there's 2 points really. First of all, what I'm trying to highlight here is there is a problem. The council know there's a problem. They know that a roundabout's the best solution, and they're sort of turning around to the developer in this case and saying, well, we understand what you're doing, and having a turning circle in your site is good, but don't worry, we've got the final solution. But in effect, they haven't got the final solution, because that's a funding issue, and that's nowhere in sight. So just trying to get my head around how we can add weight to something when we know full well at the moment there's nothing in the pipeline for a roundabout unless funding comes from somewhere. So could you just clarify where we are with that, please? Maybe Julian wants to come in. I know Julian's done a lot of work on that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I can confirm that there isn't money available for at present for improvements to try and stop lorries going into Haveley. The difficulty we have as an authority, we don't actually have the powers to stop HGVs or use camera enforcement for HGVs particularly. We can only enforce HGVs by putting bus lanes in so that it's open for buses to use. But obviously, if an HGV uses it, say we put a width restriction with that, so that HGV has no choice but to use the bus lane, then we can obviously enforce that because it's a vehicle going through a bus lane, so that we can enforce under the Traffic Management Act. We don't actually have the powers as an authority to enforce lorries abusing weight restriction signs at the moment. So there were a number of sort of suggestions that were put forward in when there were consultations done with residents, and one of those was the ideas was a roundabout. There were a number of other options put forward as well, because obviously I think the residents are aware that at the other end of Ship Lane, we've put in a bus lane by the roundabout, which gives the opportunity for the lorries actually to turn round, so they don't actually have an excuse for using the bus lane, because under the enforcement system, you have to provide a facility for a lorry to be able to turn round. The applicant has obviously put forward this as a mitigation measure, but at the present we're not actually convinced that this would actually work, because it is offline, it's not actually online. So the potential for lorries to ignore it is still there.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that, Julian. But I suppose really what I'm trying to allude to at the moment is if a sat-nav sends a HD lorry down Ship Lane, at the moment, there's no way for them to turn around. Obviously, the applicant's putting it as part of a promotion that they could then move on to their land to turn around. So I accept that. I'm just, at the moment, it says there on 7.44, although the applicant is promoting it, the council is aware of the problem. And if it progresses with the scheme, to deliver one of the consultations options, then it can be assumed that the issue will be dealt with. But we know the money's not there. So that's a big assumption to be making, and then turning around to the developer and saying we can't add no weight to that. So, all right, then I get what you're saying. I know it's tough, it's not easy, but yeah, certainly food for thought. And with that, I'll hand over to Councillor Fletcher. Then there's a lot of names up, so I'll go through you one by one. Councillor Fletcher.
Thanks, Chair. Matt, don't know if you know, but what size is the original stadium car park in relation to this new PDI car park?
Chair, bear with us. I think this question did crop up I can't, to be honest with you, I can't remember whether or not I put it in the report.
I couldn't see it. But it looks a lot larger.
If you wanted an answer, I could provide it, but I'd need to track back through emails, so it would take me in it. But I mean, yes, it is larger by a degree. I'd suggest. I mean, yeah, there's a material difference between a car park which could accommodate 1,224 vehicles, and off the top of my head, probably less than 100 vehicles. I would imagine at the the existing. But if you wanted, it would take me a few minutes, but I'd have to track back through some emails to do that.
Yeah, not a worry. I mean, so what that's telling me, Matt, is that even if we were able to magically resolve the HGV problem, you're looking at increase in motor traffic, vehicle traffic, along some parts of that road, increasing by a factor of 10. And given that that's an area where they already struggle with the whole rat run problem, strikes me that this PDI is in kind of the wrong place at the wrong time. So I was interested to know, that it kind of looked like it was significantly larger, and from the sound of it, we're talking maybe 10 times larger, with everything that means for extra traffic on the roads, extra road pollution, etc., in an area which is already a pollution action area. So, sorry, I've added a statement onto the end of that question, but thanks. I think that gave me the idea I was after.
Chair, can I? It's just worth emphasising, as per the presentation, in terms of what Highways England are saying in their formal consultation response, and what the Highways officer is saying, subject to mitigation, there isn't an objection. Can I just make the point about, because I think it will probably be raised by a number of other members, the point about the HGVs, ship lane, what intervention the council is potentially suggesting, delivery, etc., finance, is there finance available, all the rest of it. What I'm going to say is that the applicant is praying that in aid as a consideration which the council should attach weight to, understandably, because no doubt they've spoken to local people and they've picked on that as an issue. All I'm going to say is that if that were to be secured via either a condition or an obligation, there are tests which apply. So, for instance, if we were to say, yeah, we think it's a great idea, we'll have a condition to secure it. Well, there are legal tests for planning conditions. So they have to be necessary, they have to be relevant to planning and to the development to be permitted. So that's the test, 3 of the tests for conditions. And in terms of if it was an obligation, for example, one of the tests is necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. Now, the development itself, i.e. the PDI and the change of use, don't generate the need for a turnaround. So whether or not, putting it as simply as I can, whether or not that benefit, inverted commas, would pass the tests for a planning condition or an obligation is very debatable, I'd suggest. So that might influence how much weight you put on that factor.
Thanks, Matt.
Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry, Councillor Byrne.
Yes, I may have missed it along the line, but have we lost at least two football pitches somewhere along the line within this plan?
Yeah, Chair, the proposed PDI, so the vehicle use, would be sited on the location of practice pitches which were used by the former Thurrock Football Club. So they're not, I went on site, it would have been towards the end of 2019, I think. So it was, the grass was overgrown, but, they are level open areas which are available, with a bit of maintenance would be available for practice pitches, which goes to the point about Sport England requiring a mitigation payment so that the loss of those pitches would be mitigated.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Caroline. Do you have your hand raised, Caroline?
Chair, yes, I did, and it was picking up on the point of the tests because, yeah, I can't see how it can pass the test in the circumstance, because as Matthew said, just as a planning obligation, that the development applied for, if they hadn't offered it, nobody would even consider putting in a turning circle for HGVs, because it's not related to the development at all, and relating to the development is another of the tests. So I don't think that it passes the test of the planning obligations or conditions, actually, and I'm just echoing Matthew on that point. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no, thank you, Caroline. I think ultimately, from my standpoint, how I'm looking at the moment is we have a football stadium that's not being used. We have football pitches that are not being used, and we have potential for Grays Athletic to go in there and be granted that as their own stadium. You've then got a developer coming along who's obviously happy to gift that to Grays, which is something that they don't have at the moment. And then obviously the developer spoke to Aveley. Now, a lot of the residents in Aveley, the councillors, the forum, they're against that development. And a lot of the talk is against the HGV movement. So for me, I think that there is weight in the suggestion that the developer is trying to appease the residents of Aveley by coming up with a solution. Now, whether that solution works or not, I'm not sure. But I think really, if you was going to look at this, and this is the direction I'm heading in, I'm trying to work out a way in which I can help the football club, help the developers, and actually try and help Aveley in alleviating this HGV issue. But let's see where we get. I'll go to Councillor Rice.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, there's a problem with Ship Lane. We understand that, and I think for the benefit of all of us, perhaps we should go and have a site visit on this, Chair. I know we're in questions, but a site visit really would give us the opportunity to look and see the problems at first hand.
Okay. We'll obviously when we get into the debate, we can get to that location if other members agree. I'm going to go to Councillor Churchman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I haven't got the minutes for the last meeting when we actually we talked about a development on the other side of the motor, a big one, where we said we were going to use an overspilled car park to ferry workers into that site. I mean, I won't name that site, but this isn't that far from this site, and what we're actually doing is ferrying cars into this site. I mean, can someone allude to that, please?
Chair, I think Councillor Churchman is probably referring to the last agenda where you were presented with a report suggesting the content of what's called a local impact report and written representation on a power proposal, so an energy project in Tilbury, which will be determined by the Secretary of State, but we are required as a local authority to provide what's called a local impact report, which the Secretary of State has to take into account by statute. I think as part of that proposal, or there might even be a standalone application, what the promoter of the energy project was saying was that they would use a site. I think it might have been part of the Arena Essex site. Don't take that as gospel because I'm thinking out loud. I think that the proposal was to use part of the Arena Essex site on a temporary basis, so that workers could park there and then they would be minibused to this site in Tilbury. So that's that proposal. The current proposal, the operational development, apart from the change of use of the part of the clubhouse which I mentioned, the operational development is a proposed vehicle pre-delivery inspection use. So that, yes, that would involve importation of vehicles, road testing of vehicles, checking of the vehicles on site, and then export of vehicles to various car dealerships. So that's the nature of the current application, and I hope I've explained what the other proposal was, because I think that was the last agenda 2 weeks ago.
Thank you, Matthew.
Chair, are you still there? Okay, sorry everyone, let me just try to call the chair back in, okay? I think he's frozen.
Hello, Wendy. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, all good. Got you back.
Okay. Did anyone else have their hand raised?
No, Chair.
Okay, then. Right. So we do have 2 speaker statements on this evening. Wendy, will you be reading those out?
No, the speakers are here themselves. Councillor Lawrence has just raised her hand. I don't know if she might have another question.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Chair. Silly question, I know it might be to some of you, but my understanding is that the football club that wants to come here, they sold theirs, the one what they had already, and was paid money for it. Is there a reason why they didn't go out and look for an area to get another one, rather than try and go to where this one is being offered them? Because I feel like this is a bit of a carrot and a stick, really, trying to entice people to give them the go-ahead on the understanding, because they know a lot of people like the football club. So is this correct that I'm thinking that they sold their one, instead of looking for another one, they're wanting this one what's handed to them, on the condition that we have HGVs and all sorts going on, with all the harm to the green belt, which we're told about quite often?
Chair, I think I might be able to add something. So Grays FC were formerly based at Bridge Road, close to the town centre. They ceased playing at that stadium at the end of the 2009-2010 season. The reason why I remember it, because I dealt with the application for redevelopment of their former ground. That was an old corporation case. To the best of my knowledge, the ground at Bridge Road was in private ownership and was leased to the football club. Again, to the best of my knowledge, I think the lease wasn't renewed, or the term of the lease expired, and unfortunately the football club found themselves without a home. So I don't think they owned the freehold. I think they were a leasehold interest, and I think the lease either wasn't renewed or the term of the lease expired. They found themselves without a home. Since then, Grays FC have been ground sharing Oh, I think they went to East Thurrock. Again, this is where my knowledge is a little bit tested. I think they ground shared with East Thurrock for a while, and they are currently ground sharing with Aveley Football Club. And Aveley Football Club have a relatively new facility, which is a 3G pitch, so a plastic pitch. So I think that's the background, to the best of my knowledge, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, thank you for that. I must have misunderstood. I'm sure I was told they did own it and then they sold it and then leased it.
Yeah, my understanding was I do know the site. So basically, they leaseholded it. I think the owner wanted up the rents for the football club, and they couldn't afford the rent. And then effectively, because they couldn't afford the rent, they were kicked off. They were given a sum of money, but it was nowhere near enough to purchase land and purchase their own stadium. So they've been homeless ever since. That is, I'm pretty confident that's what the case was. Did anyone else have their hand raised?
No, Chair.
No? Okay. Wendy, we'll go to speaker statements, please. Wendy, I'm going to switch over to my PC. My phone's playing up, all right? Cheers.
Okay, Chair, do you want us to give you a few minutes to switch over? Do you need that? Or okay. Chair, you still there?
No, I'm all good now, thank you.
Okay. Do you want me to call forward the first speaker?
Yeah, please.
Okay. The first speaker is a statement in objection, which is Teresa Webster, the resident. Teresa, do you want to present your statement, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm the chair of the Aveley and Kennington's Community Forum. 120 residents and the developers attended a public meeting in 2019. There was no support for this application. Traffic movement in Aveley has increased dramatically in recent years. Ship Lane in particular, which is one of the main routes in and out of Aveley, is already adversely affected by the congestion and the regular incidents on the major roads surrounding Ship Lane, as well as the Dartford crossing. In addition to the thousands of impending vehicle movements coming in and out of the new Ocado distribution centre in Purfleet Road, will exacerbate the congestion issues further and also add pressure to the second main route in and out of Aveley. The HGV movement's already using Ship Lane on their route to the logistics centre in Stifford Road continues. Not only does this application detail HGV movements in and out of the PDI centre via Ship Lane, additionally, every vehicle that is delivered will require road testing, creating more vehicle movements, and I'm going to quote, it's over 4,700 just on the busiest months during the registration on road testing. So that's movements on the main route in and out of Aveley, and the busiest months are March and September. So that will be thousands, increasing air pollution in an area that has already been identified as having excessive levels of pollution, adding to respiratory illnesses, including lung cancer, and that is as per the Thurrock Air Quality Action Plan, AQMA, Aveley, May 2016. There's no carbon neutrality with this application. The HGV turning space, we believe, will not solve the problem. It's not part of the highway. With regards to Thurrock Football Stadium being gifted to Grays Athletic, there is no benefit to the Aveley community. We already have a football stadium in Aveley, being Parkside, who have 22 youth teams predominantly made up of Aveley youth. Grays Athletics belongs in Grays, not Aveley. Grays Athletics annual return dated the 20th of June 2020 details 340 members. This application affects all the residents in this community, Aveley, which is thousands of residents. Jobs created at the site are minimal, up to 30, and do not weight against the loss of our green belt. The flooding on the Mardyke, most people are aware recently of how bad the flooding's been. Yet I note it's a high risk flood zone. And we all know what's happened recently to Cherrywood with regards to the flooding. The loss of this greenbelt site would be a great loss to the residents of Aveley. The application does not meet the very special circumstances required to develop on the greenbelt. I am aware over the past few days, an article published in Thurrock News asking for people to email the chair of this planning committee with regards to if they would like to support the stadium being Grays Athletics' new home. I'd like to ask how many of these emails that have been received by people emailing in, responding to the chair and the committee, how many of them actually live in Aveley and are going to be affected by this application? Aveley residents will not have the luxury of coming into the area purely for sport. They live here and will live with the consequences every day. Chair, I ask, in view of this and the recommendation before you, I politely ask for your consideration to refuse this application.
Okay, thank you for that statement there, Teresa. Wendy, would you like to invite the next speaker through? Thank you.
Yes, the next speaker is Julian Sutton, the agent in support.
Thank you, members. I hope you can hear me. This is an application which represents a unique windfall employment opportunity to the borough, which will deliver substantial community highway and health and wellbeing benefits. And I need to just correct a number of points. Firstly, just to say the Environment Agency has supports this application. It maintains existing greenfield runoff rates. There is no additional risk of flooding. There is a proposed investment into Belhurst Park of £500,000 to offset the loss of the pitches. I do not know where the planning officer has got his figures from for provision of 3G pitch, but that money could be used for a 3G pitch, flood lighting, improvements to the changing rooms. It is not simply a like-for-like replacement. It is a net gain. The traffic figures you've just been told are wholly wrong. At present, there is a two-way traffic flow on Ship Lane of about 11,000 vehicles a day. Our scheme will add 156 trips a day. That is 1.4%, except in September and March, when it will increase to 330, which is 3%. It's not thousands. And of course, our HGVs will come from the M25 to our site and back again. They don't go anywhere near Aveley. We've also agreed not to have any imports, exports or car testing during peak time. You've talked a lot about electric vehicles tonight. Group 1's brands include Jaguar Land Rover, which is going fully electric by 2025, Ford, which is going fully electric by 2030. Currently, 40% of the stock is electric. It'll be 60% by 2025, 100% by 2030. Fundamentally, this application can offer the silver bullet to take HGVs out of Aveley. We have discussed with your highways colleagues how we could put a bus lane in front of our site, which could then have a camera, and that would stop HGVs going through Aveley. My understanding is the roundabout is costed £1 million. This RHGV turnaround, which I believe does meet the test of conditions, offers a saving to the council of upwards of £1 million. We have submitted a flooding sequential test report, which we consider fully addresses the second reason for refusal. There are 30 jobs which will be advertised locally. I attended Nippon in 2019 when your chief executive told us that Thurrock is open for business, and the benefits of this application are clear. They are unique to this site and they are overwhelming. We have no alternative site in the borough as a fallback. Unless permission is granted for this application, all of those benefits are going to be lost. So therefore, on behalf of my client, on behalf of Grays Athletic Community Football Club and all its supporters, we urge you to overturn the officer's recommendations and support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that speaker statement. Okay then, is there any further questions? No, okay, I can't see anyone's hand up. So I'll go to Councillor Byrne.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, Councillor.
Hello? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Councillor Byrne.
Right, can I first of all say how many spaces are in this car park before I carry on?
Julian, do you want to come in there?
Chair, sorry, I'll jump in. It's 1,224 spaces.
Yes, I thought that. So this guy's saying there's 300 vehicle movement. So is he saying he's going to put 900 unsold cars in that site? It's never going to happen, is it? Really? And what other thing I was going to say, if we go for this, we are saying that Thurrock is that borough that says, give us a gift and you can pick and choose where you want to build. Greenbelt, that's fine. It says money talks. It says it's okay to lose 2 full-size football pitches, and we've already heard there is already an Aveley football club. We are talking giant car park for a gift. The question for me is, what is the benefit to the residents of Aveley, please?
Okay, right, we're still on questions. Just to confirm, are you happy to go into debate, or do members have questions? Councillor Fletcher?
I think we're probably ready to move on to debate, Chair. I don't know what anybody else feels.
Yes.
Yes, certainly, Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right then. So, yeah, just picking up on your points there, Councillor Byrne, I understand where you're coming from in terms of that. I mean, ultimately, when you say about the loss of the 2 football pitches, I mean, ultimately, they're not being used at the moment. They've not been used for the last few years. I mean, you could, and I'm talking in favour of the development at this stage, but you could argue that if Grays was to continue to struggle, ultimately, you're going to lose them and their clubs, and there's a lot of them. So I understand what you're saying, but the pitches are not in use at the moment. So for me, I think you have to take that into consideration. Not only that, but sometimes with a green belt, you have to look at it as well as to what type of green belt it is. Now, it's opposite an industrial estate. It's next to a hotel. You've got a caravan site, which I don't have too much information on, not too far away. So I get what you're saying, but ultimately it's not the world's most pristine green belt, and those pitches are not being used at the moment. We'll go to Councillor Fletcher.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to pick up on what Councillor Lawrence was saying earlier about carrot and stick. I think we are being offered a carrot to disguise a rather large and fairly manure-covered stick. First off, it's not so much the quality of the green belt that we're talking about. It's what's being put on it and what effect that's going to have on Ship Lane, which we know is already a problem. And I'm quite interested that the applicant can decide to tell local people they're wrong about how many cars go up and down their own road. I think it's fair to say that whatever that number, it's going to increase significantly with this facility. That's not just going to have an impact on traffic, it's going to have an impact on pollution. This is an area, it's already an action area. We've identified it as a pollution area. This is not going to help. I think the problem we've got is that we're all probably unanimous in wanting to see Grays Athletic come back to Grays, note Grays, but not at any price. And the price for this one feels a little bit too high for the local community, feels a little bit too high for an area that's already too much of a rat run. And I, for one, do not feel like being strong-armed into an unreasonable development by being offered an incentive with a football club.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments there, Councillor Rice. I think my own personal opinion is I think we need to be slightly careful with Ship Lane, its location.
Hang on a
So
minute,
first
Chair.
of all,
Councillor Rice is the one with hair. I'm Councillor Fletcher.
In fact, actually, it's an industrial area. I can't see any homes. Sorry, Councillor Fletcher. This is effectively an industrial area. Now, I fully accept that, yes, Ship Lane is a problem for Averley, but for this particular development, HGVs and cars, they're not going to be going nowhere near Averley. Now, I appreciate the HGVs that break the rules are, but the HGVs going into this site are not going to cause the residents of Averley any concern. And as you heard, there's only going to be a 1% or 3% increase in road traffic. So we're only actually talking about additional traffic on that Ship Lane to the roundabout from the site, which is no more than 100 metres.
Yes, Chair, but that's additional traffic on already overburdened road. And that doesn't take into account the traffic that having the club there will generate, because you would hope that having its own ground would be a good move for the club. You'd hope that we would start to see fans coming back to Grays Athletic, and they've got to come from somewhere. So you are basically looking at significantly upping the traffic on that particular road. I love the idea, I just don't like the location.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Rice.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, it's like everything. You know, Grays years ago, they were forced out their ground because of the current owners. They decided to put the rent up, which you rightly said, and they're homeless. They were given £750,000 from a 106, but of course that expired, so they have no ground. But I think in the interests of the residents and ourselves, I think we owe it to the local community to go down there and actually see this level of traffic for ourselves and see what is going to happen. So I would like to propose a site visit. I'd hope that one of my colleagues would second it and we put it to vote, and let's see where we go, Chair.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Wendy, before we... Okay, Wendy, where are we with site visits at the moment? Because I know we're a bit restricted. Is there a date for us to convene them?
Not at the moment, Chair. I think it'll be once I know what the what the national government has set out in their roadmap, but the monitoring officer hasn't said anything about site visits when it can go ahead yet. So at the moment, I can't really give a date until later in March, I guess.
Okay, thank you. All right then. So there's a few hands raised. I'll let some people have an opinion, then we'll go to that vote. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not really for a site visit. I've listened to the residents and the over 100 people at the forum, and it's a shame tonight that Councillor Van Day couldn't speak, because I know he's got information on this and I know he supports his residents. This is the sort of thing that I was concerned about, actually, with the Tilbury Marshes, because if you don't keep an eye out on things, everything turns industrial. We're all held over the coals if we talk about trying to build some homes for people what are homeless and living in flats, but it seems as though we're bending over backwards for this football area. I know they need a place, but like Councillor Fletcher said, it's the wrong place. And also, I think they knew what they was doing when they built. They decided to buy this greenbelt area and then decide to want to turn it into a PDI centre, buying it on the idea that they know that they was going to get away with it. If they want to do something good, they could still lease the football ground out to the club. and keep that separate. If they still want to do the right thing, they could still do that. Because as we said earlier, most of that don't need planning permission.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Steve Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with what's just been said anyway, but just to go back a step, and it comes again as no big surprise, but I noticed that the agent summarised by saying all of these benefits will be lost to Thurrock. But what is not said is that there's a damn great chunk of greenbelt land that will be lost forevermore to Thurrock, because once it's been built on, that's it, it's finished. It never ever comes back. So the question is, do you really want to make a bigger industrial sort of operation in an area where if there's a minor incident on the A13, the M25, the Dartford crossing, the whole area becomes gridlocked, and all we're going to do is magnify that problem and destroy the greenbelt at the same time? That doesn't seem to me to be a particularly smart way of going forwards. And I think I do agree that the football club is a bit of a red herring in my view. I mean, yes, I can understand people would support it, but at the same time, I don't think that justifies the destruction of whether it's football pitches or whatever else. It's a big piece of greenbelt, and you can see from those photographs, it's a very open area, and there isn't too much left in that part of Thurrock that's open anymore. So I have to say, I think it's a loss, and it's a loss that once gone, it's gone forever. That's what you have to remember with the greenbelt. Every time you say yes to it, it gets smaller, and nobody ever gives it back to you because they can't. Thanks, Chair.
No, thank you for that, Steve. We'll go to Councillor Shinnick. Did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I'll say I am quite concerned. I know that they are saying there's not a lot of concern with flooding, but I drove down that road today, and over the Myrdite, the water's really high, and I think this is a main concern, because if you're going to put 1,200 car parking spaces there, that is not going to absorb the water, and I am worried for the residents of Aveley, you know, with all this flooding risk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Salmons.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not in favour of the site visit. I actually know that site very well, having lived in Aveley. The whole thing on that junction is just not right, because that road, it's just terrible when you get stuck there and there's bad traffic. And I've got concerns that with additional traffic, be it football or the PDI centre, that's just going to add to a problem that is already quite bad. So I'm not in favour of the application, and not a site visit.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shinnick. Councillor Byrne, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I have, please. Is the speaker still on?
Chair, I've had my hand up for ages. I mean,
go on then, mate. Go on then, mate. Go for it.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I don't think there's anyone in this committee that would, you know, not like to see Grays Athletic have a ground, but this is at the detriment of Aveley. I mean, I've lived in Aveley. I lived in Aveley for 38 years, and I'd like £1 for every time I've done a 3-point turn on Ship Lane when the bridge is shut, when Lakeside is mobbed. This and the air quality. I mean, that is actually on the Thurrock website. I mean, this is, we all want to see the Greys do well, but not in Aveley. We've got a football club in Aveley. So, what I'm trying to say is, Chair, I mean, this is the wrong place. This is such a busy road, and like the floodplain, the Myrdite has been in the local media in the last 2 months, flooding. We've had Cherrywood flooded. you know, we've got to look at this on a professional shout. Fair enough. You know, the agent gives it but the people that live there, and I think everything's been said, you know, and I think this is, you know, not the right place to put this. It needs to be somewhere else.
Okay, thank you. And then Councillor Byrne.
Yes, I don't know if the agent's still on, but I still can't get my head around. He's saying there's 300 car movements, so why does he need 1,200 spaces? Just something I can't work that out. If there's 300 movements, there's 900 spaces that either got me non-used or he's telling polkies. And the other thing, we're a planning committee. We don't vote on is it a carrot. We vote on planning. That's carrots. We ignore the football club. We ignore all the carrots going in. We purely vote on planning, or do we not? I don't know. But the main question is, he's saying 300 cars or 300 movements, and he needs 1,200 spaces. I don't understand that one, please.
Matthew, would you like to come in there and just clarify that, please? Just the points that Councillor Byrne raised in terms of vehicular storage and movements.
Yeah, Chair, as best I can. I mean, obviously the application is accompanied by a transport statement, which has been supplemented by additional documents. Now, and Julian might want to chip in as well, help me out if I get out of my depth on this one, but as I understand it, stock would be delivered, i.e. new vehicles or used vehicles would be delivered. They could potentially be held on the site, you know, before delivery. Obviously, they would be held if the various testing was undertaken. So I would imagine there would be some lag between vehicles being imported to the site and then being exported, so there would be a need for capacity, storage capacity, you know, during the period of time. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't recall. It could be a number of weeks, I'm assuming, before vehicles, in between vehicles being imported and exported potentially. So that's what I would imagine. That's why that capacity is needed. So the number of vehicle movements doesn't necessarily, or the number of transporter movements, or the number of road test movements doesn't necessarily equate to the number of car parking spaces. In saying that, I'm mindful that at Sea Road Port, probably last year, might have been the year before, we had an application for a car storage building because they also import vehicles from roll-on ferries. They're held on site. They can be held on site for a period of time. So they need an amount of car parking spaces. That doesn't necessarily equate directly to number of movements. So that may explain it. Julian's got his hand up. One point I would make, because I think it is important. There's been a lot of discussion about HGV movements, about car movements. We haven't raised that as a reason for refusal, because subject to mitigation, neither Highways England nor the local highways authority object. It is a straight bat, if I can put it in those terms, green belt argument which applies to this case, and we don't think that the harm is clearly outweighed. There is the side issue about flooding, because that's also been mentioned as well, so it's worth pointing out. There is no objection from the Environment Agency. However, we are obliged as a local planning authority to run what's called a sequential test. Put simply, we don't think there's been enough information submitted to enable us to undertake that test. If the application, for argument's sake, was deferred, for example, for whatever reason, well, there could be an opportunity for the applicant to submit more information, and that test could be run, and that reason for refusal could, in theory, fall away. But again, we go back to the greenbelt argument. That's the substantive issue before you. We don't think that the harm is clearly outweighed. So the greenbelt reason for refusal, if you were to put things on a hierarchy, perhaps that's the paramount reason before you. I'll stop there because I think Julian might chip in on highways.
Thank you, Chair. in terms of the movements, what actually happens is obviously the vehicles come in on big transporters. So obviously those will take somewhere in the region of 8 to 9 vehicles, maybe even 10 vehicles. So if 4 or 5 obviously transporters come in, they're probably bringing in about 50 vehicles, and the sort of out movements are a mixture of either deliveries, individual deliveries, so the cars come out individually and are delivered to the garages, or they go out on mini transporters. So it's two or three vehicles going out. So the storage areas obviously needs to be larger than what if they're saying 300 movements, because obviously those 300 movements are also made up of lorries coming in. So there are more cars coming in, but not necessarily as an individual car. They might come in as a transporter load of
Okay, thank you, Julian. I think there was 2 more hands raised. I think I had Councillor Byrne. Did you want to come back in? And then Councillor Churchman, I think your hand's still raised.
Yeah, I'm working out my calculator. If we're looking at 900 cars at 20 grand each, we're looking at storing 18 million pounds worth of cars that are just going to stay there and not be sold. It just don't add up, does it? Nobody's going to store 1,200 cars without selling 1,200 cars. So these cars are going to move. So there's going to be 1,200 movements, not 300 movements. Nobody can sustain 18 million pounds worth of stock. So the sums don't add up to me.
So, Councillor Byrne, the cars come in and out on loaders. I think you can get about 8 or 9 on, can't you? You know, like a lorry loader. Those cars aren't going to leave independently. Every single one of those cars is going to leave on a HGV, and it's going to have about 10 vehicles on it. And I think there was it 15 movements a day? It was 15 times 9. 15 times 9, someone help me there? That's how many cars are going to be leaving the site in a day on 15 HGV.
135?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'll take your word for that, for Councillor Fletcher. That's where your numbers are there, Councillor Byrne. Are you do you understand that? You've got a better understanding of
that. Yeah,
perfect.
With that, there's just 20 million pounds worth of stock somewhere, so it's not adding up to me.
Okay, no, okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Churchman, your hand's still up.
Matthew's just said about the recommendation is not about traffic, but this is about Greenbelt floodplain. And to be quite honest, I will be supporting the officer's recommendation for refusal, and I think we need to go to that point because I'm severely worried that, you know, with this road, the congestion, we've got a football ground in Aveley, so I'll just see what other councillors think.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councillor Churchman. I think I've got 5 members here who have indicated that they're not happy. Well, I can't get to that point now because hands keep getting raised. That's not a problem. I'm just saying, yeah, we'll get there when we get there. Councillor, who's next? Councillor.
Councillor Lawrence.
Councillor Lawrence, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say quickly that although they're saying there's not so many car movements, that they're going to be on transporters, we all know the size of they're going to be with all these cars on. Could you imagine if there's an accident down there, or if one of these tips over, there'd be deaths down that road as well, which would be on our conscience.
Okay, thank you. Wendy, who's next?
Councillor Rice.
Councillor Rice.
Well, Chair, I was just going to move that we put the site visit to a vote.
Yeah, let's get to that vote and then we'll sum up. And I'm not sure we're going to win that vote for site visit, but yeah, let's see where we go. So, Councillor Rice, you've suggested a site visit. Councillor Shinnick, I think you seconded it. Are you still happy to second?
Yes.
Okay, and Councillor I'll support that as well. So that's 3 votes in favour of the site visit. I'll go around to the rest of the committee. Councillor Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Byrne.
Against.
Councillor Churchman.
Against.
Councillor Lawrence.
Against.
Councillor Potter.
Against.
Councillor Salmons.
Against.
Okay, Wendy, I think I've got everything there. That was 3 against the site visit. Sorry, 3 in favour of the site visit and 6 against. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, right. Let's move forward. So obviously, I think we've had a good debate there this evening. I think when you look at all the emails that we received, I think there was some really good arguments on both sides of this debate in terms of Grays Athletic, in terms of the residents of Averley. Having read through the report, I came here this evening thinking, actually, I probably can't approve it this evening, but I was interested to maybe do that site visit and see if any work could be done with this roundabout. If any additional work could be done with the forum to see. I know the forum said they didn't want the money spent over in Bellis, but I wondered if they wanted that money spent elsewhere, whether that could have been workable. At the end of the day, the council are going to have to deal with this HGV issue at some point. I know the can keeps getting kicked down the road. It needs to be dealt with, and I wondered whether some work could have been done with the developer and the council to install that roundabout. I think, I understand there's lots of the football pitches there, but those football pitches are not being used. I think Grays do need somewhere they can call their home temporarily. I do agree that ultimately they do need to move back to Grays. It's important that you can walk to Grays if you support Grays, and I think that would have been a good long-term plan. But it is what it is. We are where we are. That's what planning is. We come up with our own ideas and opinions. I think it could have been workable. I look at that field. It's got some huge, horrible pylons on it. I don't consider it pristine green belt. Yes, it is a flood area, but I don't know if I'm a bit mad in saying this, but that's probably a bit more of a concern for the developer. They obviously would have put their own drainage in there, but I don't think it would have affected over flooding on the Mardyke because the flood agency didn't raise any objections. So I do think there was a good opportunity here. That is my opinion. You're obviously all entitled to yours, and I'm not suggesting I'm right. Let's head to that vote and see where we go with this one. Who would like to recommend refusal on page?
Happy to do that, Chair.
Councillor Fletcher, who'd like to second that?
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Lawrence has her hand raised.
I'll go ahead, Councillor Lawrence.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I hope Regeneration might have their ears open this evening and think about that we need a football club in Grays and to incorporate that into what they're planning ahead rather than making it too industrial.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Yeah, I know. My only thoughts at the moment are I do think Grays, I know it's brilliant that it's run by the supporters, but unfortunately football is one of those industries where you do need, I think, an owner to come in with the cash to assist. And I do wonder whether there's any scope with the Lower Thames crossing. Obviously, they're going to be buying up huge volumes of land. So I don't know whether there's going to be some sort of option there for community benefit if that road does come. But obviously, as a council, we're against that. I know when I was on the Lower Thames crossing, I was always on the side of the argument that, look, I don't want the road, but if it's coming, we need to try and get the best out of it, the most value out of it. And I do wonder whether that is a potential for the future, because you can't put Grays in Central Grays because it's already been built on. I've looked, I've tried to work out a way in which we can put them. But yeah, no, valid points, Councillor Lawrence. Let's head to the vote. Although, Councillor Churchman, you've got your hand up. Thank you. And Councillor Byrne.
Sorry, Chair. I just Councillor Fletcher proposed it, and I was willing to second it.
Okay, thank you. No, that's acceptable. We can head to the vote. Councillor Byrne, is your hand up?
Yeah, I would have seconded it anyway, but I'm saying I'm a massive supporter of forums, and I know they know exactly what's going on where they live. So I'm in full support of the residents and support their forum. The other thing, we're talking about unused pitches. Tottenham don't use their pitch, but they've still got it. So that's not a good excuse, really, is it? So I'm totally in favour of the Aveley residents.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. It'll be. I know you're obviously from the east of the borough. It'll be interesting to see what happens with it, Thurrock, East Thurrock, because I know I think they're looking to develop their land and then move on to public lands. And I know the residents and forum were against that. So let's hope they don't end up homeless as well. Okay, then. With that, let's head to the vote. So that was backed up by Councillor Churchman. That was recommended by Councillor Fletcher. Let's go to the vote. All those in favour, let me just find out the page. Sorry, guys. There was page 60, and that was recommendation 9.0. No, sorry, 8.0. The committee has recommended refuse planning commission for the following reasons, and you've obviously got the green belt and flood risk assessment. I'll go around to you one by one. Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Churchman are in favour. Councillor Byrne, did you just want to confirm that?
Yeah, confirm.
Councillor Lawrence? In favour or against?
In favour.
In favour of refusal. Okay, Councillor Potter?
Yeah, I'm in favour of refusal.
Councillor Rice?
Against.
Councillor Salmons?
In favour of refusal.
And Councillor Shinnick?
In favour of refusal.
Okay, and then myself, I'm against refusal. So, Wendy, was that 7 votes in favour of refusal against 2, yeah?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Excellent. Okay, then. So, good debate, everyone. Obviously, there was a lot of involvement there from the community. So, yeah, no, good. And I hope the residents of Aveley will obviously be happy. So, onwards and upwards. Application 19/01418 FUL Thurrock Football Club has been refused. And that takes us on to the last item on the agenda, which is 20/01318/FUL 32 Lancaster Road, Chafford 100 Grays, found on pages 63 to 74.
Chair, ready for me to go?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Right, okay. Let me open up the presentation again. Oh, hang on. Okay, you'll be glad to hear this isn't a particularly long presentation. So it's a site members may be familiar with because it's been presented to committee for. So the site's at Chafford 100 at 32 Lancaster Road. The proposal is to demolish an existing double garage, to subdivide the plot and to build a new detached 2-storey dwelling. So that's the site. It's quite an irregular shape. You can make out the main dwelling house, which I'm trying to highlight there for you, and the existing garage, which I'm trying to highlight on the southern part of the plot there. That's a Google Earth image. It is quite well landscaped, and there is a change in levels. So the levels actually rise off to the west there in towards that area. So we're talking about the house and the garage, which is roughly where I'm trying to indicate in the middle of the screen just there. And then the existing block plan on the left, the proposed block plan on the right. So the garage gets replaced by a 2-storey dwelling. The plot gets subdivided, and that's zoomed in. So another image showing the proposed dwelling on the southern part of the plot, and you can make out the curtilage, i.e. the garden, which would be associated with the new plot, and some of the existing tree planting is highlighted there in terms of the green notation. Floor plans, it's a 2-bedroom property, 2 stories in height. There's some sections through there. The only benefit of those drawings on the bottom left there is to show the change in levels. So there is a fall in levels from west to east across the site. Now, I've mentioned planning history because it is highly relevant to this case. So on page, let me get there, page 64 of the agenda, reference is made to, well, an application in 2019, in point of fact, which was refused, but more relevance as an application made last year, so that's reference 20-00251, similar description of development, i.e. demolition of the garage, subdivide the plot, construct a new dwelling. Now, that particular application, which was refused by this committee, was appealed. So the applicant appealed against that decision, and Secretary of State appointed an independent planning inspector who looked at the appeal and determined on the 19th of January that the appeal should be dismissed. So the purpose of that drawing in front of you now is to compare the current proposal on the left against the proposal which was considered by the inspector and dismissed last month. The difference is that the position of the proposed house has moved to the rear, i.e. to the left there, to the west, by approximately 600 mil. I think it's slightly over 600 mil, so in old money, around about 2 foot or so. That is the only change. Looking at the reasons for refusal previously and looking at the inspector's report from last month, those concerns still exist. So the inspector considered that it would be a cramped appearance. It would, in essence, be overdevelopment of the plot. That would harm the character of the surrounding area because there's a more open form of development. In terms of private amenity space, there's a concern that it would lack sufficient depth and wouldn't be adequate in terms of dimensions and wouldn't be an attractive area. So the recommendation before you is consistent with the previous recommendations and consistent with the appeal decision, is to refuse planning permission. There are a couple of images. I'll just show you that image here. So the donor property, if you like, is off there to the right hand side, and the plot which would be subdivided is basically the centre and the left there, and then that's the left hand side of the plot. So that would be the new garden for the proposed dwelling, and you can make out in the background the houses in the background at a notably higher level, which just serves to emphasise the change in levels across the site. So the recommendation before you is to refuse planning permission, consistent with the recent recommendations and consistent with the appeal decision from last month. Thank you, Chair. I'll just stop sharing and switch off.
Okay, thank you. Steve Taylor, you had your hands up quickly there.
Yes, thank you. Matt, don't switch off yet, Matt. We're not quite got to the end of the night. A couple of quick questions. On the plan that you showed, which was the, and I'm looking at a printed version of it, it's, how do I describe it? It shows the two properties, and it shows notionally the trees that are surrounding it, which I recall from having gone on a site visit there last year. But on this plan, there's some orange circles or red circles printed along the sort of pavement or the front of the property. Are they shrubs, or are they things that are being taken out, or things that are being put in, or?
Yeah, Chair, that notation usually means either trees or shrubs to be removed to accommodate development. So yeah, you're quite right. On the hard copy, which I'm looking at as well in front of me, along the front boundaries of the road boundary of the site, there are 1, 2, 5, I count.
Yeah.
So they would be either trees or shrubs which would be removed to accommodate the development.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, because it was, I recall it was very overgrown there. So that's my first question. Thanks for that. At least I know what that notation means now. When you say it was refused by the inspector on the 19th of January, that was this year?
Correct.
Yeah, that was the question. And I'm assuming quite a lot of those trees will have TPOs on that are shown on that same plan.
Yeah, bear with me a sec, Chair, because I'm sitting at the dining room table and I've literally got papers everywhere I'm looking, and I can't, the bit of paper I need, I can't find, typically. I had it a minute ago. Hang on a sec, got it. Always working from home, eh? or not, as the case may be. Hang on. I did read this earlier. I can't find it now. I believe, yeah, hang on just a second. Paragraph 6.17. So the trees to the rear of the site are covered by TPO. Yeah. I'd have to check
that's fine.
The detail to find whether or not any of the trees actually on site are covered by the TPO, but certainly there are TPOs in the area. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, that's fine, because I just was, the reason I was asking is because I know when I went to look at the place last year or sometime last year, and I looked, and that what currently is the garden or the bit behind the garage is virtually in permanent darkness, isn't it? So unless all those trees were to go, if you're going to call that little triangle a garden, then it's going to be like midnight most of the time. So no, that's fine. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Was there any other hands up?
No, Chair.
Okay then. All right then. I don't think we've got any speaker statements with this one, have we, Wendy?
No, we don't, Chair.
Okay then. Right. So with that, we can head into debates. Obviously, I'll start this one off. So yeah, we did look at this obviously last year. It was a very close debate. I think it was 4-4 with my casting vote. A little bit surprised it's come back so quickly, but obviously, look, members are well within their right to call in applications, and developers are well within their right to submit again. I won't go into too much detail. I thought when Matt showed me the screen of this one compared to the last one, I mean, I'm not very good at spot difference anyway, but that was difficult to see. Obviously, it has gone through that inspector report for refusal. Uniquely enough, I'm not entirely against the application. I'll say what I said last time is it's all about a standard. And I know we look at these on their own merits, but I think if we lower the standard, then this is going to become more and more common. Now, I'm not against in the future if planning rules change. If the government change and say, you know what, we need more slide plots, we need to lower that standard. But we're not there yet. And I'll be honest with you, we do get a lot of these applications. They come in thick and fast. They sort of stick a house on the side of the garden, and they are refused. So yeah, interesting to see where it goes. I'll be honest with you, that inspector report, I don't think, when we rejected it last year, that was without the inspector report saying it's a bad idea. So yeah, interesting to see what members have got to say. Councillor Fletcher, I think you got your hand up.
Chair, Councillor Fletcher's left the meeting. Maybe he's trying to rejoin, I think.
Yeah, sure, we'll give him a couple of minutes, Norris.
Yeah, I'll just call him back in. Councillor Fletcher, are you back with us?
Hello, Fletch to Planet Earth. Sorry about that, folks.
There you go, Norris.
For some reason, I tried to unmute myself and disappeared myself. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to sort of... now, it was actually myself that called this in, and I originally called it in because I didn't feel that the plans had been given adequate consideration at the time. I thought that one or two of the reasons for recommendation I'd seen, I'd seen the planning department set aside those same reasons in other cases. So I wanted to be given full and fair consultation, full and fair, consideration. I think it's had that now. We've had at least 2 goes at it ourselves. We've had a site visit. It's gone through to the inspector. It's had its appeal. So I would still like to see it happen, but I think it's for councillors to decide. There really is no more information to be given. It's had a thorough consideration, and that's all I ever wanted to see happen.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Well, when we got this piece of paper through from the company, they did go to say that the amenity space that required the proposal to provide 50 square metres. They're actually providing 140 square metres. So that's quite a substantial area. They also talk about it's in keeping with the residential character of Lancaster House. Obviously, it's a brownfield site. It's not a greenbelt site. And delivery of the home, new home, will achieve a contribution towards the 5-year housing supply. Most importantly, Chair, there are no neighbour objections to the proposal. So I would like to think that we might look at this and with the revised planning application, might give it a tick in a box, but you know, I'd be persuaded by other members, you know.
Okay, thank you. Matt Gallagher, did you have something to add there?
Sorry, clicking on right guys. It was, I don't want to hold up debate because I think we're into debate now, but Councillor Rice referred to something submitted by the applicant. I don't think officers have seen that. So we're unsighted on that, unfortunately. I would add a point because I think what Councillor Rice may be getting at is, and he's got a point, you know, making best use of sites within the urban area, presumption in favour of sustainable development, that sort of thing, which is fair comment. All I would say on that point is the inspector from last month did go into detail about paragraph 11, and that's the presumption in favour of sustainable development, because this isn't a green belt site. What's called the tilted balance, so a presumption in favour of sustainable development, would ordinarily apply. However, there is a caveat. As ever, there's a caveat, and the caveat is that any the presumption doesn't apply where any adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefit. So yes, there's benefit in terms of a new house, but the inspector considered that in the balance and said, look, in terms of character, in terms of impact on the surrounding area, in terms of the cramped nature of the garden, those factors weigh against the presumption in favour of sustainable development. That's not to say a site round the corner, the site up the road where there was a bit of side garden and it was a more regular shape and perhaps there's a bit more space, that couldn't be found acceptable. But this one's, in my view, has had a good go. It's been through an independent inspector and he's concluded that the council's refusal was legitimate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Fletcher on this. I do sometimes feel that it can be seen as a bit harsh. After all, wherever you go now, it's very rare you go up a road and you see all the houses look the same. And quite often now you see houses that's got full side extensions, which has been given the go-ahead, only to later find out if they've been turned into granny annex. So they are really two properties. So I think we have to see fair on this, and that the applicant has really gone out of their way to do everything what we've asked. So it can be seen a bit spiteful, trying to help, because we're always being told we don't want to build on greenbelt, and this is a brownfield site where there's other houses, so it would help the area to get another house up and going.
Okay, thank you. Thank you there, Councillor Lawrence. I mean, from my perspective, I do have, and I didn't mention it at the start, I do have a slight concern with this one. So ultimately, what we've got to do as a planning committee, we've got to acknowledge that we looked at this last year. Now, when you look at that picture that Matt sent us, now we rejected that last year. Since then, it's gone to appeal. It's been rejected on appeal. The applicant has resubmitted it. Now, as I said to you, I am having trouble looking at that picture that Matt has just put up there and telling the difference between the two proposals. We've got to be very careful with this, because other developers are going to look at this and go, that planning committee makes decisions based on the weather. They're going to say, well, we lost a vote in November, but it was a close vote. Well, let's just sub it again in January. Oh, we failed it. We're going to have Grays Athletic back here before long. It's incredibly dangerous, and it's not a great look, guys. It's really not. I mean, we've got to respect the vote, and if we don't respect the vote, it's just we're in murky territory. If you can, hand on heart, look at that, look at a resident in the eye, and say, I rejected that in November, but I'm going to approve that in March because of such and such reason, then yeah, I can't. We'll see where this vote ends up. But as I said, it's not a great look. Councillor Rice.
Yes, Chair. I mean, the only thing I was going to say is that in their reconsideration, they have put 140 metres of amenity space. So that is quite substantial.
Councillor Rice, didn't Matt come back on that point a moment ago? Didn't he say that wasn't?
Well, it's there in black and white, you know.
Where's it there in black and white? What page? Sorry.
Well, they've given us, they sent us this thing through the post, you know, and you know.
Sorry, I've not got nothing through the post. I do apologise.
Yeah, I had this thing.
I mean, it's not in the report. I mean, that's the most important thing.
It's not in the report, but it's quite clear. What I'm trying to say is the applicant's gone some way to actually address the points the inspector has made. And what's interesting is, once again, there's no neighbourhood objections to
there wasn't no neighbourhood rejections last time, Councillor Rice, and we rejected it. This is the concern. I'm not saying, as I said to you, I said in November, I'm not entirely against it. The standard worries me, and what I'm saying is we rejected it last year. What has changed? Nothing's changed.
Well, they've provided, Chair, 140 square metres.
I can't take what you're saying there. Well, logic, because it's not in this report. Why have they sent it to you in a letter, but they've not sent it to me or put it in here, and the officer's not aware of it? You've got to look at it from my perspective.
It also came through in an email, so you know it's pretty common. But why they haven't sent it to you, I don't know.
I'm more concerned with why they ain't sent it to the officer, really, as opposed to myself.
I don't know.
It is what it is. I get what you're saying. Carry on as you was.
But all I'm saying is that, you know, we get pulled over the coals for building on greenfields. This is a brownfield site. They have gone to a situation to address, you know, the situations the inspector has put. And I think it deserves a tick in the box, and it's one more that's on a brownfield site, not a greenfield site, Chair. But I'll be guided by the committee, you know.
Yeah, no, I understand that. No worries. Yeah. Councillor Byrne, you had your hand up.
Yes, please. I'll just say, was that letter that Councillor Rice got, was that declared when we started the meeting, or was this just thrown in now? So did we declare it at the start of the meeting?
I think, I'm not sure. What, Councillor Rice? I did hear something. Yeah.
It was declared at the start of the meeting. Had an email and this piece of literature through, and, you know, it just looks like they've made an attempt to address what the inspector has said. But as I say, I'll be guided by the committee. You know, if the committee are mindful to approve it, that's fine. If they're not, then, you know, let them go again and see where they go to.
Yeah, okay. No, thank you there, Councillor Rice. Was there any other hands up? Okay, so yeah, let's just follow the formality there. If no one has anything more to add, just get into the recommendation now. Okay, so 7.0 conclusions and reasons for refusal, page 71. We'll obviously head to that vote. I'd recommend refusal. Is there a seconder there? Sorry, hang on. Sorry, it's recommendation 8.0 on page 72. Okay, thank you, Councillor Shinnick. So sorry, I'll just clarify that, guys. It was recommendation 8.0 on page 72, refuse planning permission for the following reasons. The proposed developing by reason of citing as such, the proposal would be out of character and appearance with the street scene. Okay, so look, we'll go through the votes one by one. Councillor Kelly and Councillor Shinnick have voted against. Councillor Fletcher?
Sorry, Chair, can I just check? You voted against.
Sorry.
You voted in favour of the resolution.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher, pointing out. I'm in favour of refusal, as is Councillor Shinnick. Councillor Fletcher?
Yeah, I'm against.
Councillor Byrne?
Yep, I agree with you. Consistency. I see no difference between this and the last one. So yeah, I'm with the chair on this one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Churchman?
Sorry, Joe, for the recommendation, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Lawrence?
Against?
Councillor Rice?
For.
Sorry, Councillor Rice, we're voting in favour of refusal. Can you just clarify that?
Sorry, against, yes, against.
Okay, Councillor Potter?
In favour of refusal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Salmons?
In favour.
Okay, right. Wendy, did I get... What was the score there?
Chair, we've got 6 for and 3 against.
Okay, okay, so with that, 32 Lancaster Road, agenda item 8, 20/01318/FUL has been refused. As I said there, let's see if anything changes in the future. Let's see if the standards drop and see where we end up. Okay, right, guys, thank you very much for that. It's just before 10 o'clock. Obviously, I think a really good meeting. Some really strong debates there. I'm sure looking at the first application, we'll talk about that next month, hopefully. Thurrock Football Club, yep, is what it is. I think obviously the residents of Averley will be happy and you put your arguments forward very well. And then Lancaster Road, yeah. Obviously, I think it was certainly worth looking at again. Best of luck, everyone. See you in a couple of weeks.